A haunted house. It seems like a fun idea for a date, although the model is the type to jump at everything. He knows everyone in the fake blood and clown makeup are just out-of-work actors or students looking to make some easy money, but any loud screams are enough to get him leaping out of his own skin. Then again, he expects that's part of his date's plan. Get him scared so he seeks shelter in his arms. It's quite sweet, actually. So he agrees. The place is hardly the stuff of nightmares. In fact, it's all pretty homesprung, and being there with company makes it easier to giggle at all the half-baked attempts to incite scares. The distinctly ketchup-scented blood stains are a particular highlight that leaves the model and his date in stitches. Then they spot a hall of mirrors and can't resist heading inside. It's even cheaper than they're expecting. Multiple standing mirrors that seem to have been taken straight out of people's homes and set up in an easy-to-navigate maze. Still, it ends up being fun for the most part, until the model spots something in his reflection in one of the mirrors. A tiny blemish. That wasn't there yesterday, and he's certain of it. His whole job is centered around how he looks. But he tries to brush it off. After all, even he gets insecure about his appearance from time to time. It happens to everyone. But in the next mirror, it seems to look even worse. Maybe it's the lighting, he thinks. Then he starts to worry. Has his date noticed? It plays on his mind, and the rest of the way through the hall of mirrors, he avoids looking at his reflection. A few days later, and he's sitting in the makeup chair, getting ready for a photo shoot. He doesn't dare open his eyes, trusting the makeup artists to cover up the things he's been seeing on his face every time he looks in the mirror. He's tried to cancel the shoot, calling his manager and telling her that he just can't be on camera right now. But she comes racing over to his apartment to get a look at him for herself and tells him she can't see anything wrong, to just get over himself and not be a diva. He tries to settle into the familiarity of the photo shoot. The outfit changes, the rapid flashing of the cameras, while he tries desperately not to let his concern show on his face. A few times it slips out, the cameraman telling him to look less worried. It's hard to be, especially with how he thinks he must look. Seeing the photos afterwards, it's even worse than he thought. It barely looks like him. The person in the pictures is unrecognizable to the model. He argues with the cameraman and manager, telling them they need to Photoshop the images. Neither of them can see what's wrong with them. A few more days pass, and the model is cowering in his apartment. The thing he sees in the mirror doesn't look like him anymore. He doesn't even look human. He's seen it everywhere. Looking back at him in the glass pane of windows, out of the corner of his eye in the TV, shuffling in the place where his own reflection should be. It creeps into every photo, takes his place, standing in the spots he's supposed to be. The model's even started having nightmares about seeing whatever he's become. There's something very wrong with all this, and it all started in that hall of mirrors. Held in a secure storage locker at Site 19, SCP-4682 is to remain wrapped in an opaque material at all times, in accordance with its special containment procedures. Under no circumstances are any personnel permitted to view SCP-4682 directly. If they do, then they likely won't like what they see. SCP-4682 is, or at least appears to be, a common silver and glass mirror. Upon closer inspection, there appears to be nothing immediately or obviously anomalous about the mirror, even down to having been constructed with entirely ordinary materials. The anomalous properties of SCP-4682 will only manifest from the point a person observes their own reflection within the mirror itself, after which point, any individual that is subjected to the effects of SCP-4682 must avoid any and all reflective surfaces effective immediately after looking at SCP-4682. An affected individual will be advised by the Foundation to avoid being depicted in any and all visual mediums, including never having their picture taken or allowing themselves to be recorded on video, either through the use of digital or film cameras. Psychologists working for the firm Schuyler and Crane Psychiatry, a front for the SCP Foundation's Psychological Research and Analysis Department, will conduct therapy sessions with affected individuals on a monthly to weekly schedule, determined on a case-by-case basis, depending on the severity of the side effects they experience after looking directly at SCP-4682. This, of course, leaves the lingering question of what exactly happens when a person observes their reflection in SCP-4682. Do they find themselves trapped in an inescapable mirror dimension? Does it impart an anomalous effect that removes them from photographs, leading them to question their own sanity and existence? Not quite, but it's arguably just as cruel. Any human being that observes their own reflection on SCP-4682's surface will experience a permanent and irreversible shift in their perception. Whenever viewing themselves in SCP-4682, they will immediately notice physical differences that are not actually present on their real face or body, but they only appear in the anomalous mirror. These have been known to include a mix of the following discrepancies in reflections. For one, they might perceive themselves as having incorrect proportions of the face, such as their eyes being further apart or closer together than they are in reality. This can also extend to the proportions of the rest of their body too, as the reflection might depict them as being inaccurately taller or shorter than they actually are, or show them having a significantly different body mass or shape. Many of the D-Class test subjects deployed during experimentation with SCP-4682 have also reported seeing various blemishes and skin conditions on the mirror's inaccurate reflections, from acne to facial scars, eczema to even conditions as severe as first-degree burns, all of which are not present on the test subjects' actual faces. Dental hygiene of the test subjects is often depicted as being much worse in their SCP-4682 reflection than it is in real life, with yellowed or rotting teeth appearing, as well as cavities that do not correspond with the subject's actual dental records. Reflected in SCP-4682 are also often the addition of facial features that are considered, at least by conventional standards, to be unattractive. Some test subjects have reported seeing themselves sporting unibrows or uneven facial hair regardless of gender. The same also further extends to the rest of their body, with numerous instances of D-Class seeing themselves with excessive body hair that isn't present outside of the reflection. Following a person's direct exposure to the mirror's surface, the effect of SCP-4682 will become unavoidable. While not possible for anyone else to observe any noticeable change in said person, they themselves will notice the perceived imperfections in their appearance and other reflective surfaces. This extends not only to conventional non-anomalous mirrors, but also to television, computer, or cell phone screens, windows, and other glass surfaces, as well as anything that is polished sufficiently enough to produce a reflection. Additionally, these inaccurate anomalous differences to an affected person's appearance will be present in any photographs or video footage of them, meaning that there is virtually no proven way to convince them that these imperfections are actually present beyond pointing this out. The differences to a person's appearance are not present when they are viewed by others, or when they view themselves with the naked eye. However, naturally, it will be impossible for them to view their own face without the assistance of a reflective surface, which will always depict them as having inaccurate imperfections that are not actually physically present. As if triggering this perceptual shift wasn't bad enough, SCP-4682's anomalous effect is also cumulative, as in, it only gets worse every time a person sees themselves again. When viewing their reflection after exposure to SCP-4682, whether using the anomalous mirror, a normal one, or any other method, another new imperfection will seemingly have appeared. Any reflective surface or method of visual recording around them will appear to make more and more differences present in their appearance. Anyone around that observes the altered reflection of the affected person, particularly on a surface or through photographs, will also be able to view the same imperfections that they perceive. However, they will be aware that these are not actually present when they view the person directly. There is currently no known way to circumvent or cure the perceptual anomaly caused by SCP-4682 or negate the lasting effect of it. Even the administering of memory-altering amnestics have no effect, as even if an affected subject forgets what they originally saw in SCP-4682, or even forgets the moment they looked into it to begin with, in some cases, using amnestics to treat exposure to SCP-4682's anomalous perceptual alteration can irreparably affect a person's view of themselves. One member of D-Class that was given amnestics after viewing SCP-4682 began believing the imperfections they saw in their reflection had always been part of their natural appearance. For a time, this led to a degree of acceptance in this individual. Being unable to recall their encounter with SCP-4682 meant they had no inclination that their reflection had previously appeared any differently before being altered by the mirror. However, they began to notice additional inaccuracies when subsequently viewing their reflection in the mirror above the faucet within their living quarters at the Foundation. The cumulative nature of SCP-4682 perceptual anomaly gradually led to this affected D-Class developing outlandish theories about their own identity. One such train of thought revolved around the belief that the Foundation had replaced their real self with some kind of clone, believing themselves to be a replica of the original, inaccurately mimicking their appearance and possessing all their memories. After being dissuaded of this belief by Foundation psychiatrists, the affected D-Class later adopted a new theory that the Foundation had been intentionally applying sophisticated visual effects makeup and prosthetics to his face and body each day until he noticed. When they raised this theory with his fellow D-Class personnel, many dismissed it, saying that they looked no different from when they'd first arrived in Foundation custody. This then led to a growing mistrust of other members of D-Class. The affected subject believing that those around them were secretly privy to the continuing changes they noticed in their reflection, and had been instructed to lie by the Foundation. Gradually, the SCP-4682 affected D-Class developed an uncontrollable paranoia towards all Foundation staff. Unbeknownst to anyone else at Site-19, they began to believe the SCP Foundation had intentionally stolen their face and was deliberately changing their appearance every day as some means of sadistic, psychological torture. At one point, the fact that this had been the side effect of looking at an anomalous mirror was revealed by their appointed psychologist, but this explanation was rejected by the D-Class as being nothing more than an attempt by the Foundation to mislead them. Having been drawing up an escape plan in secret, the affected individual eventually experienced a psychotic break and shattered the mirror in their holding cell, both to prevent them from being able to observe the continuously worsening changes in their reflection, and in order to hide one of the sharper fragments of glass on their person, in order to use it as a makeshift weapon. During recreational time, the D-Class caught a member of Foundation security by surprise and took them hostage, threatening their safety with the shard of the mirror. Holding it to the throat of their hostage, the D-Class was still able to catch momentary glimpses of their altered reflection in the glass. Additional Foundation security officers attempted to intervene, but could not get close enough to the D-Class without risking potential harm to their captured colleague. When asked by officers attempting to peacefully negotiate, the SCP-4682 affected D-Class made continuous requests for the Foundation to return their real face. Further attempts were made to explain the effects of SCP-4682 to the D-Class. However, they once again refused to believe what they were being told. Growing more and more agitated, witnesses state that the affected individual caught another glimpse of themselves reflected in one of the facility's tinted windows. Upon seeing further alterations to their reflection, they became enraged and released their hostage before attempting something drastic with the mirror shard to get rid of this false face. They were subsequently transferred to the medical wing of Site-19, where they remained alive but unconscious for several weeks. As a form of compensation for the mental anguish imposed on them by being made to look at SCP-4682 and then being forced to forget about it, the Foundation offered to perform facial reconstruction surgery on the affected D-Class, as well as applying skin grafts to repair some of the lasting facial trauma. However, the D-Class instead refused, opting to keep their face wrapped in bandages and sterile wound dressing indefinitely, requesting that the Foundation instead develop some method of preventing them from ever seeing their reflection again. At present, there are several proposals to re-engineer the technology behind the scramble goggles to serve this purpose. One includes developing electronic contact lenses that either blur or completely remove an individual's reflection from their vision in real time. However, these proposals are still awaiting review and approval by Foundation higher-ups. A number of other D-Class personnel used during testing of the anomalous mirror have reported suffering major psychological difficulty after witnessing their altered reflections. In particular, those who have seen the cumulative effects of multiple imperfections being added thanks to SCP-4682. Many report being unable to recall what they originally looked like before seeing the inaccurate changes in their reflections, with some even developing severe depression, anxiety, and insecurity connected to their appearance. In addition to this, there have been numerous documented cases of test subjects suffering from severe body dysmorphia following testing with the object. Given that this is one of the more common outcomes that can be caused by looking at SCP-4682, and in order to discourage personnel from doing so, the anomalous mirror is often widely referred to simply as the body dysmorphia mirror. The Foundation first encountered the mirror while investigating a missing persons case in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. A civilian, referred to simply as Rob, had reported to police that his boyfriend had been out of contact for a concerning amount of time, and an investigation into his whereabouts was subsequently launched. While this would typically be solely the concern of local law enforcement, a member of an SCP Foundation mobile task force happened to be operating undercover within the area's police force. This agent belonged to MTF Iota-10. Members of this task force do not strictly operate as a cohesive unit, but are instead a number of undercover operatives spread out across various international, federal, and local law enforcement agencies. This includes the Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Ministry of Intelligence, and various police departments. The primary goal of this mobile task force is transferring potentially anomalous evidence recovered during investigations into Foundation hands, as well as reporting any anomalies discovered in connection to criminal acts to the SCP Foundation. From there, they then allow Foundation response or containment teams to step in and take over jurisdiction of these cases from local law enforcement or federal agencies. This has led to MTF Iota-10 being more colloquially known by their nickname, the Damn Feds. One of these damn feds within the local Oklahoma Police Department investigating the disappearance of Rob's missing boyfriend was present when they searched his apartment. Immediately, this embedded Foundation operative noticed something was wrong. All of the mirrors, screens, windows, every reflective surface in the apartment seemed to have been shattered or painted over, except for one, SCP-4682, which was laying intact on the carpet of the bedroom. Even worse, the cause of the boyfriend's disappearance quickly became apparent upon the discovery of a mixture of Jack Daniels and cough medicine next to a body with a note. Believing the apartment to have been the site of a potential anomalous incursion, the undercover MTF Iota-10 operative contacted his superiors at the SCP Foundation and requested that members of Mobile Task Force Eta-10 be dispatched to assess the situation. The operative was commended for making an accurate assessment of the situation, especially in requesting MTF Eta-10, otherwise known as See No Evil. Of all the Foundation's numerous deployable task forces, Eta-10 specializes in the investigation, acquisition, and containment of anomalies that cause visual cognition hazards or mimetic effects. In short, anything that cannot or should not be directly observed in order to be safely handled. Through the use of anomalous means available to only MTF Eta-10, they were able to safely secure SCP-4682 and bring it to Foundation containment. Also recovered from the scene in the apartment was the note left by Rob's boyfriend. This note revealed little about how he had come to have SCP-4682 in his possession, nor shed any light on its origins, or when he first began to notice its anomalous effects. However, it did contain insights as to how the mirror functioned through the harrowing testimony of the man who had been found dead alongside it. He had reportedly started seeing his altered reflection more frequently, so much so that it had started affecting his day-to-day life. He recalled accidentally colliding with his neighbor's car after he hadn't been using his vehicle's rearview mirror because he couldn't stand the sight of his own eyes looking back at him. It had seemingly become so bad that he had smashed the bathroom mirror in his apartment, unable to look into it for more than a second. However, still being able to see himself in the broken fragments, he tried throwing them away, only to still catch his inaccurate reflection on the metallic surface of his dishwasher. Every time a reflective surface showed imperfections on his face thanks to SCP-4682, he destroyed it, smashing his phone when he saw his reflection in the glass screen protector. According to his note, he even took a hammer to a hand mirror that Rob had given him as a gift, destroying it so thoroughly that there were only tiny shards and splinters of glass left. And he could still see himself in those, too. Desperation had long since set in, and he was considering somehow inducing blindness in himself, before eventually deciding that there was only one way to be rid of the sight of his own face for good. He had been seeing himself with crooked teeth and chewed fingernails, and had started to believe that Rob's feelings had enabled him to look at his boyfriend with rose-tinted glasses. He felt unworthy of his partner's love, and felt that Rob deserved better, unaware that the imperfections he was seeing in himself weren't really there, and had only appeared as a result of looking into SCP-4682. This tragic outcome of the effects of the body dysmorphia mirror are a large part of the reason that the SCP Foundation have long since discontinued testing with it, opting to keep it in storage where it can no longer hurt the way people look at themselves.
It's Saturday night, and a teenaged boy and girl are out on a date. They are strolling through a shopping mall with plans to see a movie later at the theater attached to the mall. As they walk through the mall waiting for their show to start, the girl spots something. It's a photo booth. She excitedly grabs the boy's hand and pulls him inside. They close the curtain, insert a coin, and the machine comes to life, snapping a series of photos. The two exit the booth, but both seem to be a little off. It's getting close to showtime, though, so they start making their way to the movie theater. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the mall patrons, something is happening deep below the ground. The boy and girl exit the theater and walk arm in arm through the alley back toward the parking lot where the boy left his car. It's late now. The sun has long since set, and they're all alone. But they don't hear the footsteps behind them, or sense the pair of bodies that are following them, getting closer and closer. They get to the car. It's the only one left in the parking lot, and the boy takes out his keys to unlock the car when he fumbles and drops them to the ground. As he bends over to pick them up, he finally sees who has been following them. It's them, a pair of doppelgangers coming straight towards them. They look exactly like the boy and girl, except for their faces, which are horribly distorted, with strange lumps and no eyes or mouths. They look as though they were a drawing of a face that was somehow smudged out. The boy quickly gets the keys and grabs the girl, dragging her away from the creatures, who are now reaching for the boy and girl, grasping and clawing at their faces as they try to moan through their skin-covered mouths. He gets the car unlocked, and both manage to get inside. As the creatures bang on the windows, the boy starts the engine and drives away, leaving the abominations behind. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-913, also known as My Face That I May Be. SCP-913 is a take-your-own-photo brand photo booth, a product of the Sony Corporation made in the 1970s. This is a standard-looking photo booth, bearing a close resemblance to the many thousands of others that were in operation around the world at the time, with no anomalous visual characteristics at all. The only detail setting this machine apart from its countless brethren is a small metal tag which has been added to the back of the machine at some point, but a significant amount of wear has made it impossible to read what, if anything, was ever stamped on the tag. SCP-913's basic operation is also not anomalous in appearance. It will only activate if an individual sits inside and inserts the required coinage, at which point it will take a series of photos, just like a normal photo booth. The photos will also appear normal, though often some will be heavily distorted and obscure the subject's face in various ways. What truly sets this photo booth apart, however, is what happens outside of the booth when the pictures are taken. While the individuals who had their photos taken, classified as SCP-913-B instances, are able to exit the booth with no obvious effects, below the mall, deep underground, something truly terrifying takes place. Underneath the mall is Site-81715, an extra-dimensional space which is accessible through a mall maintenance service door located in Sub-Basement 3, a door that does not appear on any of the mall's structural blueprints or in other records. The site consists of a giant cavernous room, which appears to have been hewn right out of the surrounding limestone. In the middle of the room is its most distinguishing feature, a large, deep pit. The walls of the pit are made of an unidentified substance, though it appears similar in both appearance and composition to human fat tissue. These fleshy walls secrete a powerful, corrosive substance, which makes examination and exploration of the pit particularly dangerous. When SCP-913 is activated in the mall above, a humanoid creature, classified as SCP-915-A, will appear in this pit. The bodies of these creatures are similar in appearance to the individuals who had their picture taken inside of 715, but their faces are radically different. Each has severe facial disfigurements and abnormalities, such as large growths, deep lacerations, and the absence of facial features. After appearing in the pit, these SCP-915-A instances will attempt to scale the fleshy walls of the pit and leave Site-81715. These instances are considered hostile, and Foundation security personnel are authorized to neutralize the creatures by any means necessary. Further research into how the SCP-915-A entities are formed and what exactly the pit is are ongoing, and it's not currently known how many 715-A instances exist down in the pit. With the entities who were able to climb out of the pit able to be relatively easily neutralized by security forces, SCP-915 was originally classified as safe. It was contained at its point of origin within the mall in Ohio, and Foundation personnel posing as mall employees would collect the photos printed by the machine. However, following additional discoveries, this classification necessitated changing. The Foundation began noticing inconsistencies with SCP-715B entities after a researcher tested SCP-715 himself by sitting inside and having his photo taken. Soon after, he began acting in ways that were considered strange, such as when he turned down a promotion to a prominent position with better pay and perks for seemingly no reason, and when he skipped a mandatory site inspection for reality-bending anomalies. After noticing these strange behaviors, a Foundation research head had an anomalous optical enhancement device placed in the oddly acting researcher's bedroom, and learned a surprising truth about the SCP-715A and B entities. The Foundation had been killing the wrong ones. The device, which could remove anomalous reality-distorting effects from images, showed that the researcher was actually one of the creatures from the pit, with the telltale facial distortions. Following this shocking revelation, the research head used the same device on the creatures still inside the pit underneath the mall. They found that when the anomalous visual effects were removed from the distorted creatures who were trying to get out of the fleshy pit, that they were actually normal-looking humans. These SCP-715A entities were the human beings who had entered the photo booth, had their pictures taken, and were somehow transported to the pit. They had been trying to escape their prison and tell the Foundation who they really were, but this only resulted in them being terminated by the on-site security forces. In order to fix this mistake, SCP-715 was hastily reclassified as Keter, and SCP-715 was removed from the mall in order to be stored in a secure locker at Site-19. Research personnel were no longer able to access SCP-715 without special authorization, and study of the interior was limited to what could be done via remote drone use only. The Foundation began rounding up all known instances of SCP-715B, who were now the ones subjected to immediate termination. Foundation staff did manage to interview one 715B instance, though, who had been previously believed to be a fellow Foundation researcher. It is unknown exactly what the researcher doppelganger said in that interview, but it must have been extremely serious, as the end result was another complete change in protocol. All attempts to contain and neutralize instances of SCP-715B would immediately cease, since if there were as many out in the world as the doppelganger claimed, then ultimately, it would better maintain normalcy and ensure the secrecy of SCP-715 if they were allowed to go free. Sadly, the same was not the case for the SCP-715A instances that still existed down in the pit. The researcher doppelganger advised that it would be unwise to remove them from the pit, and the current Foundation policy is that down in the pit is where they will remain. Following this interview, SCP-715 was reclassified once again as safe. The photo booth was also moved again, this time to a maximum security storage locker at Site-81, and Foundation personnel have been prohibited from interacting with SCP-715B instances at all. However, there is one more piece of information about SCP-715, and it is only accessible to those with proper security clearance. Another Foundation agent was found to actually be an instance of SCP-715B and taken into custody for observation. While under surveillance, it was discovered that this instance, classified as SCP-715B7, was emitting low-level radiation that was somehow directed at Site-81-715, the location of the pit. During an autopsy of the creature, it was found that the radioactive emissions were actually increasing in output and frequency, and soon after, a power outage and containment breach occurred at the site where the autopsy took place. Following these events, the body of SCP-715B7 disappeared, and video surveillance confirmed that several members of Foundation staff were responsible, all of whom had been involved in SCP-715 research. The staff members escaped with the body and left no other evidence behind, save for a single photo with the ominous text, "My ears that I may hear, my eyes that I may see, my mouth that I may speak. Do not touch my face." No other information regarding SCP-715 has been found, and many questions remain. Just what are instances of 715B? And what do they want? Are they some kind of hive mind colony that reproduces through the use of a mysterious photo booth? What happens to those left behind in the pit? And what will they do should they ever get out? Investigations are ongoing. A kindly-looking old woman is carrying groceries into her home. When she closes the door, a crack forms in the wall, and a tile slides down off her roof, crashing to the ground and shattering. The next day, the local builder seems confused. He just fixed a similar problem a week ago at another house, and another the week before that. He'll patch this crack just like he did before and repair the roof, but as he does so, he can't help but think he'll be at another house with the same problem soon. Old people are like this sometimes, though, breaking things on purpose to get someone to come visit them. Oh well, as long as the money is right, he'll keep doing the repairs. That evening, the old woman is in bed when she's woken up by something falling onto her face. A crack is opened in the ceiling right above her bed, and plaster is falling on her. What is happening to this house? She would have to call the builder again in the morning and let him know that it was getting worse. She gets up to clean the plaster dust off her face, but stops halfway to the door. Was that a noise she heard? It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. Another noise. She definitely heard something. Is someone in her home? "Hello?" she cries out. "Whoever you are, you better go. My husband is going to be home any moment, and he won't be happy." The noises seem to have stopped. Maybe she was imagining things. Who would rob a poor old woman, after all? She didn't have anything worth taking. She still needs to wash the plaster off her face, though. She listens for a moment, and when she doesn't hear anything else, she opens the bedroom door and screams. The next day, a child stands in front of the house with a look of shock. Was there an earthquake? How could a house end up like this? They ring the doorbell, but there's no answer. They knock on the door and are surprised to find that the door is open. "Grandma?" the child cries into the quiet house. No response. The child enters and looks around. The house is a mess. Chunks of plaster have fallen off the walls and ceiling. Shelves have fallen over, spilling their contents. And there's broken glass from shattered light bulbs everywhere. The boy looks up the stairs and can see that his grandmother's bedroom door is open and the light is on. "Grandma, are you up there?" Still no response. The child nervously starts up the stairs, gripping the railing tight. They quietly make their way to the bedroom and step into the sliver of light coming from the cracked door. The child pushes the door open to find their grandmother on the floor. Only, it isn't their grandmother. Whatever this is looks like their grandmother, but like she has been stretched and twisted, her body bent at angles where no joints exist. The child is paralyzed with fear, unable to do anything but stare. But the nightmare isn't over yet, because their grandmother is still alive. Sadly, reports like these are all too common in this small town that is plagued by attacks from SCP-913, also known as the Crooked Man. SCP-913 is an extremely dangerous anomalous creature that is currently plaguing the population of Tembe, a small rural village in Oxfordshire, England. Every 12 years during the fall and winter months, SCP-913 will engage in a period of hostile behavior that lasts for roughly 70 days, during which time it will target and attack people who are indoors and alone after sunset. Those targeted by SCP-913 will find that the building they are in rapidly deteriorates, causing damage and creating structural integrity issues. These often appear as cracks on the outside of the building that lead to the buildings taking on a crooked appearance. Unfortunately, while the SCP Foundation is aware of both the location and the periods within which SCP-913 operates, it has so far been unable to prevent any attacks. Additionally, the Foundation has yet to be able to produce either an image or even a physical description of SCP-913 due to the effect it has on recording equipment. Cameras set up to capture the anomaly produce only distorted or corrupted footage, leaving its appearance a mystery. Victims targeted by SCP-913 meet a fate that is, in many ways, worse than death. Their bodies will experience extreme deformations, as their bones suffer dozens of fractures and are stretched and twisted in various unnatural directions. They are then healed by the rapid generation of cartilage and the growth of extra skin to cover the new elongated limbs, leaving the victims a malformed knot of gnarled extremities. Some of the cases are quite severe, with one victim having just their forearm extended to over 2.4 meters, and another who was left stretched to 12.5 meters in height. Despite the gruesome injuries suffered, the majority of victims are still alive following the attacks, though they will more often than not be left completely paralyzed, in a persistent vegetative state, or both. 27 victims of SCP-913 are currently being held in a long-term care facility within a wing of a local hospital that was requisitioned by the Foundation specifically for the care and treatment of 783 victims. Like many of the anomalies that the SCP Foundation investigates and contains, many of the residents of Tembe appear to have some awareness of the Crooked Man, and the anomaly has become something of a local boogeyman. Researchers have even documented local school children singing a nursery rhyme that appears connected and may even explain the origins of the creature. It goes, "There lived a crooked man who made a crooked deal. He kept a crooked cane and his catch in crooked creel. He stole a crooked child who cried a crooked squeal, and that crooked little man was broken on the wheel." A month before a recent SCP-913 period of activity was to begin, a Class D personnel, D-209, was sent to live in a Foundation-owned home in the village. Audio and video recording equipment was set up throughout the house in case the D-Class was targeted, in the hopes that some information could be gleaned should something take place. 43 days after he began living in the house, something finally did. One evening while in bed reading a book, D-209 heard noises on the ground floor of the home. Cameras on the first floor experienced corruption and showed only a distortion moving through the house. When D-209 attempted to leave the bedroom and escape the home, they immediately encountered SCP-913. During a period of time that lasted roughly 5 hours, their bones were broken numerous times and reset over and over, leaving D-209 a twisted mass of flesh and bone. Strangely, at the exact same time that D-209 was being attacked, all 27 of the living prior SCP-913 victims in the hospital experienced violent seizures, despite most of them having been declared functionally brain dead and the rest being totally paralyzed. Also concurrent with the attack was a seismic event on the outskirts of town, and the details revealed by this event were both illuminating and extremely disturbing. Foundation personnel were dispatched to the site of the seismic activity to investigate and determine if it was connected to SCP-913 in any way. There, they found a small group of angry townspeople, perhaps frustrated by seemingly unending paranormal events in their town and the lack of progress that had been made to stop them. After a tense standoff, SCP Agent Collins fired her service weapon into the air, and the crowd quickly scattered. Now, free of distraction, the agents could begin their investigation in earnest. They immediately spotted several objects sticking out of the earth. Upon closer inspection, these were identified as elongated human toes. A dig team was sent to the site, and by the next day, a mass grave had been uncovered that was filled with a twisted mass of what appeared to be victims of SCP-913. Their mutated and drawn-out bodies were well preserved despite being buried directly in the ground, and had all been buried head down, with their arms extending deeper into the burial pit. As one researcher was attempting to take a tissue sample from one of the bodies, the ground beneath him gave way and he fell into the pit. He landed on the tangled mass of limbs which shifted under his weight, and he disappeared into the pit beneath them. Agent Collins immediately found a length of rope, tied it to her waist, and climbed into the pit with instructions to the on-site team to pull her back up when she signaled. Agent Collins descended into the pit beneath the bodies, and after several minutes, she was extracted, though without the missing researcher. At debriefing, she described how she found an anomalous location under the ground beneath 783's victims' corpses, and she was so rattled by what she saw that she was granted a temporary leave of absence. The Foundation had to know more, and a D-Class personnel was quickly selected for exploration of the underground anomaly. D-2172 was equipped with audio and video recording equipment, along with several scientific measurement tools, as well as a firearm, and was lowered down into the pit via crane. Their wired tether to the surface would both send the information they collected back, as well as serve as their lifeline to the surface. As D2172 was lowered past the mass of corpses into the darkness, they experienced a sense of vertigo before it was realized that the anomalous effects extended to gravity as well, which had become reversed, and that they would need to start climbing up in order to descend further into the pit. They soon climbed out of the hole surrounded by the reaching, extended arms of corpses and emerged into an open world with an overcast sky. It looked exactly like the town of Tembe, with the same buildings present there as in our world. The world appeared to be uninhabited, though, with no sign of the missing SCP Foundation researcher. D2172 began investigating the buildings and found them all to be empty as well, though they did unfortunately find signs of a struggle in one house, with what looked to be evidence of the missing researcher's demise. They continued exploring the area and found that the anomalous properties of the location extended to its borders too. And as the D-Class walked north out of the town, after several kilometers, they found that they were now somehow back at the southern edge of the town. D2172 was ordered to return to the entry point, but as they walked, they were suddenly impeded by the deformed body of an SCP-913 victim that stretched across the road in front of them. D2172 drew and fired their weapon at the entity, but it didn't react, and they were forced to retreat into the nearby woods. After several minutes, they stopped to rest when they spotted something else. In the distance, the D-Class saw what looked to be a giant white birch tree, and it was coming towards them. As the living tree approached, it became clear that it wasn't a tree at all. What looked like branches were extended bony fingers that it was using to walk. The long branch-like fingers were coming out of the top of the tree, where D2172 could see their origin. These branches were the elongated fingers of the missing SCP Foundation researcher. D2172 turned to run as the giant living tree chased them back into the town, firing their weapon at the creature whenever they had the chance, but was unable to stop it. The visual feed was soon lost as the audio continued to broadcast the screams of D2172. But this wasn't the end of the expedition. The on-site team was surprised to witness after several hours that the tether was pulled on twice, the signal that it should be reeled in. A medical team was sent to the site, since it was assumed that D2172 would need immediate care, and the team began reeling in the line. After several minutes, they spotted the harness that should have been strapped to D2172, but with nothing in it. They continued to pull, but the harness became stuck on the mass of corpses in the pit. They then noticed that it wasn't actually stuck. There was a hand holding onto the harness for dear life. It was D2172's hand. The team kept pulling as D2172's arm kept stretching out of the pit through a length of over 3 meters. But eventually, the resistance became too much. D2172 lost its grip, and it was seen sinking back into the mass of corpses inside the pit. Following this expedition, it was determined that only special operations teams and mobile task forces would be used to explore the dangerous anomalous location in the future. At least 3 such expeditions have been undertaken, though the details remain classified for the time being, and perhaps it is for the best if they remain so. The SCP Foundation will continue to monitor the town of Tembe in an attempt to learn more about SCP-913 and hopefully discover a means to contain it and its related phenomena. Due to the difficulty in containing the anomaly, it has been classified as Keter, and a local building adjacent to the Tembe Hospital has been requisitioned and designated as Provisional Site 5 in order to accommodate the increased Foundation presence. As the SCP Foundation continues to research this mysterious and highly dangerous anomaly, any victims of SCP-913 are to be retrieved, their injuries cataloged, and then their bodies are to be incinerated.
Tell me if it starts to hurt, the dentist says before reaching into your mouth with a pair of orthodontic pliers and starting to pull your front teeth back into place. Evidently, your screams aren't enough of an indication of the extreme pain you feel because he doesn't stop pulling. After what feels like hours of excruciating oral surgery, you're finally standing outside the dentist's office texting with a friend. "Come on, show me. It can't be that bad," reads the message from your friend. You're nervous to send her a picture, though, since you have a small crush on the girl and you don't want her to see you in this state. But after she asks you again, you decide to take a quick selfie and send it to her anyway. You snap a photo of your mangled mouth and jaw. The mess of wires had to be hastily applied to move your remaining crooked teeth back into place with globs of fast-hardening epoxy, and the result looks like a low-budget horror movie prosthetic. You send the message and wait.
You watch the dots appear that indicate she's writing a response, then watch as they disappear without a reply. You sadly slip the phone back into your pocket and begin walking away. As you make your way home with your head hung in shame, you keep your mouth shut tight. You don't want any passers-by to see what you've become. You decide to detour through the park to avoid any people as much as possible, and as you walk, you decide to stop at a picnic table next to a small pond. You sit at the table and watch the ducks mill about in the water. They have it so lucky, you think. Ducks never have to worry about their teeth getting knocked out by a baseball and leaving them looking like a monster. The ducks suddenly all start moving away from your side of the pond, eventually taking flight and leaving completely. You get the sense that they're trying to get away from something, and you turn around, but there's nothing behind you. Oh, it must be me, you think. But then you get the sense that there is something behind you, and turn again. Still though, there's nothing. It's just you, the picnic table, and the empty pond. You turn back to watch the still water, but you can't shake the feeling that there's someone behind you, and turn again. Hello? Is anyone there? You ask, but no one answers. You turn back to the pond and you scream in fright at the thing standing before you and fall back off the picnic table. You get up out of the dirt and you don't wait to stick around to see who or what this thing is. You start to run as fast as you can, but you immediately hear it chasing after you. Instinctually, you take out your phone and start trying to take pictures of whatever it is that's behind you. You know no one will ever believe you, and you want some evidence of this thing. You manage to snap off a couple of pictures, but you can hear the creature gaining on you. You scream as your mouth begins to ache. Perhaps running this soon after your surgery is causing your damaged teeth to shift, and the pain is intense. It starts to feel like your mouth is full of jagged rocks, but you can feel that it is your teeth pushing out and stabbing into your mouth. You take one last picture before the creature leaps on you, sending you both to the ground, and your phone tumbling into the dirt. Early the next morning, a police perimeter has been set up in the park. The detective arrives and walks past the traumatized-looking jogger who must have been the one that discovered the grisly scene. An officer guarding the site lifts up the police tape so the detective can enter the crime scene that surrounds a body lying under a white sheet. The detective asks the officer if they've found anything yet, and the officer hands the detective a plastic bag containing a dirty cell phone. The detective puts on a latex glove and removes the phone from the bag. The screen is cracked, but it still works. There's numerous messages on the screen that look like they're from someone trying to apologize for not responding sooner, and asking where the phone's owner is and if they're mad at her. The detective opens the phone's camera app and starts looking at the last photos that were taken. It's a strange series of pictures. They seem to all be selfies that a young man was taking as he ran through the park. It almost appears as though there's a figure behind him, but it's hard to tell. There's a foggy white vignette on the pictures that gets worse the further he looks, slowly closing in until the last photo is nothing but a blurred milky white screen. The detective flips the phone over and looks at the lens, which you can see is completely covered in a hard white substance. The detective places the phone back in the evidence bag and kneels down next to the body. The police officer turns away. He's already seen the victim and doesn't need to again. The detective pulls down the sheet to reveal a truly shocking sight. The boy's mouth is a mess of teeth, far, far too many teeth. There are teeth growing out of every part of his gums at horrible angles, filling his mouth and jutting out at painfully odd angles. Who could have done this? What could have done this? The local police department may not have had any idea what the state of this victim meant, but the SCP Foundation did, because they had seen the same occurrence dozens of times before. In fact, they had seen it happen so many times that they had classified this anomalous entity as SCP-913, but it had already earned a much more ominous nickname within the Foundation. It was known as the Grinner. Very little is known about SCP-4910, and eyewitness accounts of the creature are all extremely brief due to those who have interacted with it quickly succumbing to its effects. What is known is that SCP-4910 is a quadruped and appears to be made partially, or perhaps entirely, out of teeth. Those who encounter SCP-4910 quickly experience its primary anomalous effect, which is that it causes the extremely rapid overproduction of teeth in its victims' mouths. Existing teeth will quickly increase in size, protruding farther out of the gums than should be able, while new teeth will begin to sprout from any available space in the mouth, including the roof of the mouth and underneath the tongue. These new teeth will completely fill the mouth, which almost immediately inhibits their ability to speak or vocalize at all. The creature will then use this opportunity to attack and incapacitate the victim, before starting to feed. Further adding to the mystery of SCP-4910's appearance comes from the effect it has on any nearby recording equipment. Cameras and other devices that come within SCP-4910's proximity will have their critical components compromised by a sudden appearance of a layer of dentin, which is the calcified material that partially makes up teeth. Interestingly, SCP-4910 seems to possess some level of intelligence, as it appears able to differentiate between normal civilians, who it hunts for sustenance, and members of organizations that seek to hunt down and contain or harm it, which it uses for an even more nefarious purpose. While the exact mechanics are still unclear, it seems as though SCP-4910 is able to infect certain anomalous organization members with its ability, causing them to act as a vector for the effect, who then spread it to even more victims. This effect is, of course, of great concern to the Foundation, and containment protocols for infected victims have been hastily put into place. Should a member of staff begin bearing a grin with too many teeth or multiple tooth-filled smiles, they are to be immediately immobilized by any means necessary, though preferably with a firearm that allows one to keep an appropriate distance and hopefully prevent any further spread of the effect. The infected individual is then to be doused in a hydrochloric chemical compound that will reduce the afflicted to a pulp-like substance. Once this pulp is no longer animate, it can be transferred to the closest incineration site for disposal. Should a member of personnel have an interaction with SCP-4910 and feel that they were exposed to its anomalous effects, they may be saved by taking immediate medical action. Oral surgery to remove the additional teeth has been found to be effective when the procedure is undergone in the first 1 to 2 hours following exposure, though the victim will suffer lifelong permanent physical issues from the procedure. Once 3 hours have passed, the effect will have spread to the rest of the body, with teeth appearing virtually anywhere. Unfortunately for the victim, should the infection reach this point, pain management has been shown to be ineffective, and there is nothing that can be done to alleviate their suffering, save for termination. SCP-4910 remains at large and has been given the Keter classification. Mobile Task Force Epsilon, codenamed Turfing Black, is the only MTF authorized to respond to sightings, and they have been given permission to engage the creature and utilize lethal force if necessary, due to the danger this anomaly presents specifically to the SCP Foundation.
It's never a nice feeling waking up lying amongst shards of broken glass in the middle of the road. The dawn sky above the biker looks almost peaceful. It's as if nothing had gone wrong at all, as if everything is right in the world. But slowly, the throbbing pain washes into his helmeted head, and the sound of the traffic surrounding him rises in his ears. A sea of onlookers gathers around as the cars blast their horns. Through the cracked visor of his helmet, the biker can see concerned faces, people calling emergency services, and a few women crying. His paramedic bike is toppled on its side about 40 feet from him. There are long black tire marks running up to where it lies, smoking slightly on its side. With a groan, the biker sits himself up and shakes his head. Bad idea. Looking around, though, it seems he's the only one injured. His bike had gone into the front of a car at the junction. The occupants of the car stand by nervously, offering him whatever little assistance they can. But there's no time for that, the biker suddenly realizes. He looks down at his watch frantically. It's 12:03 p.m. There's not enough time. He rushes over to the bike as fast as he can and lifts it back upright. A couple of onlookers try to grab his arms, trying to sit down to rest, but he can't. There's no time. He has just 3 minutes to get to St. Mary's Hospital in central London. Right now, he's at the junction outside Baker Street Station. He can still make it on time if he gets on his bike and goes now. The biker swings his leg onto the bike and kicks it into life. He takes a deep gulp and looks over his shoulder at the box on the back of his bike. He can't risk opening it here. The damage may already be done. But if the heart is still alive in that box, it is the only chance that a 10-year-old boy has for a normal life. If he doesn't get to the hospital in the next 3 minutes, his life could be over. The school children stand in a circle, looking down at the dead bird with a morbid fascination.
Do you think it's alive? No way.
The boy in the middle of the group goes to pick up a stick. With an air of false confidence, he walks up to the bird and gives it a prod. It makes a squelching noise. The other kids all reel in shock, making retching noises and laughing about it. It's only when their teacher comes out to call them inside that the group disperses, leaving the animal carcass alone, sitting at the edge of the playground, outside the view of boring adults. Each passing day, the kids wander over to the bird's body. It's kind of the best biology lesson they've ever had as they watch the animal slowly decompose. At first, its body just shrinks, goes flat almost. The feathers start falling out, and it loses all of its color. Then it starts to get puffy. Different parts of its flesh bulge out in weird places, as if they're being inflated like a balloon animal at someone's birthday party. But then, the maggots come. There are only a couple of tiny white crawling wrigglers in the bird's body at first, but a couple of days after that, it's infested with them. The creepy crawlies wriggle all over the body. But as the boy looks down at the dead bird, he spots something very peculiar, something they haven't seen in a biology class before. There's a red maggot, wriggling and crawling in amongst the rest of the creepy crawlies. It squirms like the rest of them, but even over the course of the school day, it quickly grows larger than any of the others.
What do you think it is?
The boy stares at it.
It looks like a worm.
And a worm is exactly what it was. The next day, when the kids return, they see that the red maggot is now much larger than any of the others feasting on the bird. With a slightly translucent body, cherry red coloring, and small white speckles on its skin, it looks unlike anything they've ever seen before. Actually, not unlike anything they've ever seen before. It looks exactly like something that all the kids recognize very well. In fact, one of the kids has a bag of them right now that he's chewing on. A candied worm. The kids stare in curiosity, first at the bag of candy that their friend has in his hand, and then down at the worm, slowly eating its way through the decomposing bird. As far as their eyes can tell, the two things are exactly the same. Except, of course, that the one eating the bird seems to be alive. Kids being kids, the next thing that happened was sort of inevitable. One dares the boy to eat it. He almost retches in disgust. There's no way he's even touching it. And then, another one of the children throws down the poison chalice and dares him. The boy stands there nervously. He knows that he's not allowed to eat worms. That had been a lesson ingrained in him from a very young age. But his mother isn't here right now, and this thing doesn't look like any kind of worm that he's seen before. It almost looks a bit tasty. In exchange for eating the worm, another one of the children promises he'll give him 5 English pounds. The kids around the circle gasp. That's a lot of money. None of them have even got 2 pounds on them, let alone 5. Think of all the sweets you could buy with that kind of money. But the boy is adamant. He puffs his chest out, he stands up tall, and he nods firmly. 5 pounds, or he wouldn't do it. After some intense schoolyard debate, the deal is sealed. As the boy lies in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and grumbling, he knows that he is not happy about what his friends have done to him today. He's going to get them back for this. Only he's getting a bit of a tummy ache. Getting is the wrong word. He's had a tummy ache for most of the evening. What he's experiencing now is heartburn. It feels as if something is crawling in his chest. The boy just ignores it. It's probably just his worries about the worm inside of him. He chewed it up pretty well. There's no way that it's still alive in him, surely. His uneasy sleep is punctuated by rotten dreams. Dreams in which he finds himself lying on the floor and his playground lying on the ground at school, unable to move as people gather around him to poke him with a stick. He feels his skin covered with maggots. They even crawl across the surface of his eyes. In his chest, there's a searing pain. The boy wakes with a start as he feels his heart pounding, thudding against his ribs. It's agonizing. Adrenaline courses through him as he sweats off his face. Crying out for his mom, the boy lies there in bed, feeling the heart attacking his system. When you decide to become a surgeon, you have to accept that you're not going to get very much sleep most nights. In fact, it's more than that. You have to not only accept that you won't get much sleep most nights, but you also have to be at your absolute best when you've had no sleep, and it's the middle of the night. With over 40 years under his belt, the surgeon doesn't need coffee anymore, even when the junior doctor offers it to him as he strides toward the operating theater. Instead, he asks them to fill him in on the situation. Who's his patient? What's going on? What needs to be done? The doctor accompanying him reads the notes in a calm but hurried voice. They haven't got much time on this one at all. At any moment, the boy's heart could give out. The surgeon asks what's wrong with the organ, and the doctor looks at his notes in apparent confusion. Apparently, over the course of the night, the boy has suffered a 72% reduction in the mass of his heart. The surgeon stops just on the other side of the door. He doesn't want to have this conversation in front of his whole team. He whispers to the doctor in a terse voice,
What kind of infection does this boy have that his heart has undergone that rapid of a deterioration? It's not an infection at all, sir. Well, sir, it's a worm.
The doctor holds out a sheet to him. The surgeon takes it from him. He looks down at the x-ray to see a scan of the boy's chest cavity. It doesn't look so bad. There's a hole in the heart for sure, but the surgeon has encountered worse in his career.
This was taken when the boy was first admitted.
The doctor hands the surgeon a second x-ray.
And this was taken just 1 hour later.
It is barely recognizable as a human heart. There seems to be a mass growing in the cavity that was left by the heart, and there, infecting all of the boy's organs, was the shape of a worm. The biker weaves his way through the traffic down on Marylebone Road, eyes darting frantically in all directions. He may have a concussion, and he may not be allowed to drive at all right now. In fact, he knows he definitely isn't. But he is under strict instructions. This heart needs to get to St. Mary's Hospital before it's too late. The bike careens around the corner and skids to a halt outside the emergency doors. An ambulance team in front of him is trying to help an old lady out of the back of their vehicle, but the biker doesn't have time for them. He grabs the organ box from the back of the bike and races into the building. It takes all of his remaining concentration to navigate through the maze of hospital corridors on his way to the operating theater. On a better day, he'd be able to do this with no problem, but with his head injury, he can see the lights starting to blur all around him. Ward 6, Ward 7, Ward 7A, Ward 7B. He runs as fast as his heavy boots will allow him, feeling that energy draining from his system. He can't look at his watch. He can't check the time. He just has to find this boy. Operating theater, there, right up ahead of him, just a couple of 100 feet. There's a doctor waiting outside the door who looks up at the sound of his footsteps. The biker rips his helmet off and holds out the box with the heart in it, panting heavily. It's the moment of truth. Is he too late? The doctor looks shell-shocked, not at the biker's arrival, but clearly at something else she's just seen. The man starts to explain, but runs out of words, and instead beckons the biker to follow him into the observation room. There, the two of them stand looking through the glass at the little boy lying on the operating table with the surgeon standing over him. There's something in the air. The biker sniffs, confused.
Can anyone else smell sugar?
Next time you open a packet of candied worms, take a second to look through the little creepy crawlies in the bag. Perhaps poke a couple of them, just to see if any of them are moving. You can never be too careful. If you had told the parents of that young boy on the night when their son woke up with heart palpitations, telling stories of eating a worm at school, that the only health concerns he would have going forward were mild diabetes and a slightly raised level of blood sugar, I'm sure they would have been thrilled to hear it. You see, SCP-913, commonly referred to within the Foundation as candied worms, is much scarier on the surface than it is underneath. Not only does this SCP resemble your usual candy worm, but its body is actually composed of sugar flavorings and colorings, roughly equivalent to what you would find in most convenience store candy aisles. Each instance even has a small raised bit of writing near the tail specifying which flavor it is. While the origins of these worms are yet to be determined, cases have sprung up across much of the Western world, with higher numbers reported in areas with higher levels of diabetes. There seems to be a parallel between high-sugar diets and the presence of SCP-839. Whether they are of man-made or other origins is yet to be determined. That is not to say that SCP-839 cannot survive outside of human populations. This SCP in the wild primarily feeds on decomposing organic matter and is capable of sustaining itself on a purely vegetarian diet. However, when ingested into the human body, SCP-839 will target specific organs and burrow its way towards them. The organ in question depends on which color candied worm the SCP instance is. For example, the red cherry-flavored candied worms will burrow towards the heart and consume that, while the blue raspberry ones will instead feed on the human's kidney. One would expect the health consequences of this feeding to be severe. However, as the SCP feeds, it will also change its own shape and chemical composition until the worm itself becomes a substitute organ for the one that it is consuming. However, this substitute organ is not a perfect replacement, as other health consequences are derived from its presence. For example, the green apple-flavored SCP-839-3 targets the eye and replaces it with a jelly-green version of the human eye. While this eye is mostly capable of sight, subjects have reported mild hallucinations and blurriness of vision, as well as a greenish tint to how they see the world. Fortunately for the Foundation, SCP-839 reproduces sexually, meaning that individual instances require a partner in order to have offspring. This has made containment of this SCP much more feasible, though they are a relatively low-priority entity in the broader scope of the Foundation. There are no known cases as of yet of any SCP-839 infections leading to death or serious chronic illness. Therefore, any instances that are captured by the Foundation are sent to storage site 839-1, where they are kept in a glass housing and regularly fed a diet of plant matter each day. Here, their reproductive activity can be closely monitored and controlled based on what research is needed. Those infected with SCP-839 instances can continue to live long and healthy lives, with only minor health complications arising. Therefore, the Foundation is comfortable allowing a reasonable number of cases to go unexamined in the world. So, like I said, for next time you open up a bag of candied worms, maybe just give them a quick poke. You could be saving yourself a trip to the hospital and a lifetime dependence on insulin.
A young man tosses and turns in bed. He adjusts his pillow and tries sleeping on his back, his side, his stomach, but nothing works. He rolls over to check the time. 3 a.m. This is the third night in a row he hasn't been able to fall asleep. He feels tired. He wants to sleep. But every time he closes his eyes and sleep starts to creep in, something happens. And suddenly, he's wide awake again. It's as if someone keeps flipping a switch in his brain to awake, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. It's affecting everything in his life. He can't concentrate in class, his work performance goes down the drain. Even his hobbies become completely unenjoyable. All he wants to do is sleep. His friends and family can tell something is wrong. It's as if he has become a different person, and they urge him to go see a doctor. But the doctors tell him there's nothing they can do for him. He's perfectly healthy otherwise. He should try some natural remedies like valerian root and get more exercise. He has no idea how many days he's been awake now. 4, 5, maybe more. At this point, the lack of sleep isn't even the worst part. It's the hallucinations. Sometimes they're just a shadow dancing outside of his vision, but others are incredibly vivid, feeling more real than his now dreary life does. He had to stop going to work and class entirely since he can't concentrate for more than a couple of seconds at a time. His friends don't want anything to do with him, and who can blame them? He has uncontrollable mood swings and lashes out for no reason. He's tried every sleep remedy there is. He took the doctor's advice and exercised as hard as he ever has. But with never being able to sleep, he has no energy left. He's becoming a living zombie. He gets up out of bed but loses his balance and collapses to the floor. He tries to get up, but he can't. He'll just lie there for a while. He starts to drift away, and he readies himself for the jolt that always wakes him back up. But this time, it doesn't come. The wave of sleep that starts to wash over him feels different this time, though. It's heavier, more peaceful, and more permanent. Hi, I'm Dr. Bob, and this is SCP-966, also known as Sleep Killer. SCP-966 is the designation that the SCP Foundation has given to a creature that belongs to a group of anomalous predatory beasts, standing 1.4 to 1.6 meters tall and weighing roughly 30 kilograms. These hairless humanoids have an elongated face, a mouth full of pointed needle-like teeth, and each of their hands has 5 razor-sharp claws that can be up to 20 centimeters in length. Though unlike humans and apes, they are digitigrade, meaning that they walk using only their toes. But you won't be able to see the horrible visage of SCP-966 under normal circumstances, as they are only visible under very specific lighting conditions. They can only be viewed under light that has a wavelength between roughly 700 and 900 nanometers, which is just at the edge of the light spectrum that's visible to humans, stretching into what's known as infrared light. The only exception to this is if their skin, muscles, or organs have suffered from 2nd or 3rd degree burns, in which case, the affected areas of their body will show up under a greater spectrum of wavelengths that are visible to the human eye. Though frightening to look at, SCP-966 are actually quite weak physically, with very low muscular density. Their bones are hollow, similar to birds, and while their claws may be incredibly sharp, they are also easily broken, making them unsuited for use in combat. Additionally, they do not rest through sleep, but will, at seemingly random times, stop all movement and fall into a rest period that lasts roughly 3 to 5 minutes. after which they are able to resume their normal behavior. With all of these physical shortcomings, how did SCP-966 gain a reputation as such a fearsome hunter? The secret lies in their ability to emit bursts of a previously unknown type of wave. Hunting either alone or in pairs, SCP-966 uses this wave to inhibit its prey's ability to enter any of the restful sleep stages, and also stops the ability to microsleep. These waves have been observed to be effective at up to 20 meters, though tests have shown that they can be blocked by post-transition metals, of which lead appears to be especially effective. SCP-966 hunts and feeds on medium to large-sized animals, which includes humans. And once their quarry has been targeted by the sleep-inhibiting waves, the effect is permanent, with no method having yet been discovered that will allow them to regain the ability to sleep. Experiments have shown that unconsciousness can be induced in other ways, such as with the use of general anesthesia, though these methods have ultimately proven to be ineffective, since although the victim is unconscious, they are still not receiving any of the restful benefits of sleep while in that state. The effects of sleep deprivation on humans, both mentally and physically, are devastating. Symptoms can begin setting in after just 24 hours that can include mood swings, memory issues, and sensory impairment. After 2 to 3 days, the body's hormones become deregulated, and bodily functions like hunger, thirst, and temperature fluctuate wildly as cognitive abilities start to dramatically decline. Hallucinations, paranoia, and fits of rage are common, and the risk of death from sleep deprivation increases with each day that passes without sleep. And this is exactly what SCP-966 wants. After surreptitiously sending a burst of sleep deprivation waves at their victim, they will then stalk their prey until lack of sleep finally leads to total incapacitation, at which point SCP-966 consumes them. SCP-966 have proven to be both extremely quiet and agile when hunting. However, they have actually been observed intentionally making threatening noises around their prey, presumably to further increase their already elevated stress levels, and potentially hastening their mental degradation. On rare occasions, they will even physically assault their victim to further degenerate their mental and physical health. Some of SCP-966's prey will experience especially intense hallucinations and bouts of rage, which is theorized to be caused by prolonged exposure to multiple instances of their sleep-stopping waves. Why some victims are exposed to multiple waves when a single instance has been shown to be 100% effective is unknown, and it's hypothesized that they may only engage in this behavior when especially hungry to try and speed up the process, though others have put forth the theory that SCP-966 may take some perverse form of joy in seeing its victims suffer prior to expiring. Wild instances of SCP-966 have been found across the globe, and while the SCP Foundation has been successful in thinning their numbers, they still exist in high enough numbers to pose a serious threat to humanity. For these reasons, they have been assigned the classification Euclid. Mobile Task Forces Iota-1 and Iota-2, codenamed the Dream Hunters and Air Chasers respectively, are continually monitoring for any reports of sudden or violent deaths related to sleep deprivation in order to identify and neutralize the remaining instances of wild SCP-966. 4 SCP-966 specimens, 3 males and 1 female, have been acquired by the Foundation, and they are currently contained in a 10 by 10 meter room that is lined with lead and equipped with infrared security cameras. Each specimen is fed 20 kilograms of meat each month, and in the event that the female specimen gives birth, the new specimen is to be taken for observation and study before being disposed of prior to reaching maturity.
A storm rages outside of the little old house, as inside, a little old woman bounces a little baby on her little old knee. The baby coos and laughs as the old woman makes funny faces and noises for the child, trying to keep it entertained as they wait for his parents to return from their much-needed night out by themselves. The old woman herself needs a rest now, though. She's forgotten how exhausting it can be to watch a child. "Okay, that's enough. It's time for both of us to take a little nap before your parents get back." She gets up and takes the baby into a nearby room that looks as though it was a nursery at one time, but it hasn't been used for many years. As she goes to set the child into the crib, a strong gust of wind blows through the room. She places the baby down and rushes to the window and closes it shut. It must have been left cracked open by mistake. Brr, the room is cold from the wind, but she has just the thing to fix that. She moves to a small closet and opens the creaky door.
The little old woman strains to reach up to the top shelf and feels around. Ah, there it is. She pulls down a baby blanket, a soft baby blue with colorful animals printed on it. It looks as though it's been up there for a long time, and she gives it a good shake before walking back to the crib. Look what we have here. It's your daddy's own blankie. She gives it another shake. There we go, good as new. She leans into the crib and wraps the small helpless child in the blanket before giving him a gentle kiss on the forehead. Now you get some sleep. Your mommy and daddy will be back before you know it, and we want to show them what a good babysitter Grammy is, don't we? That way I get to see you all the time. The little old woman switches off the light and exits the room, leaving the door cracked just a few inches. She heads back to the couch and plops down on it. Almost as soon as she does, though, the baby starts crying. With a sigh, she gets back up and goes back to the nursery. What's the matter, little dear? She says as she turns the lights on. Oh no, she rushes to the crib. You've kicked your blanket off. You must be freezing. She grabs the blanket from the end of the crib and tucks it around the baby once again. There you go, that's better. The old woman leaves the room and quietly closes the door shut, leaving it open just a few inches. The moment she turns around to go back to the couch, though, the crying starts again. With a sigh, she opens the door and goes back into the room. Once again, the blanket is stuffed at the end of the crib where the baby has kicked it off. Fine, don't want a blanket? That's fine. She picks the baby up out of the crib and rocks him in her arms until it stops crying. She sets him back in the crib. There you go. No blankets, just please get some sleep. Grammy's tired. The old woman takes the blanket out of the crib and leaves the room. She closes the door most of the way and, incredibly, this time the child remains silent. The old woman resumes her place on the couch and starts to yawn. Just as she does, the wind outside picks up and howls loudly. The old woman shivers. She looks next to her and spots the baby blanket. She picks it up and examines the cute animal print, remembering when her own son was a baby wrapped in it. She smiles at the happy thought and throws the blanket around her shoulders. She leans back on the couch and finds that her eyes are growing very heavy. She'll rest them for just a moment. She won't fall asleep. She'll just rest. Mom, it's us. We're back. Thanks again for... The couple both scream when they enter the house to find that the old woman is lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood. The source of the blood is obvious. Chunks of flesh from her shoulders and upper back have been torn out, leaving jagged holes, as if she were mauled by an animal. As the man runs to the old woman, trying to do anything he can to help her, the woman runs to the nursery to find that the baby is sleeping peacefully in his crib. The woman picks up the child, tears streaming down her cheeks, and returns to the living room to see her husband kneeling beside his dead mother. Both the husband and wife are so shocked by what they have found that neither notices the baby blanket lying on the couch, or that the cruel, blood-covered mouth on it is slowly fading from view until it disappears completely. There is little in life that is more comforting than a favorite blanket. Perhaps you've had the same one since you were a child, or you have a heavy one that you like to wrap yourself in when you're feeling down, or maybe it's just one that's especially fluffy and warm that you'd do anything to keep. Today's anomaly plays on those very feelings, using them against its victims to become one of the more insidious predatory anomalies in the SCP Foundation archives. This is SCP-913, also known as the Carnivorous Blanket. SCP-913 is a type of creature that can vary in shape, size, and appearance, but, as the name implies, always takes the form of a blanket of some kind. The exact material the anomaly is made out of is unknown, but it is a very soft fiber that in many ways resembles a high-quality merino wool blend, though one that retains heat even more effectively than its natural counterpart. SCP-913's weight can vary from between half a kilogram all the way to 6 kilograms, and while examples have been found in nearly every color imaginable, it seems predisposed towards pastels and will frequently have patterns featuring stylized, friendly depictions of various animals. Both the pastel colors and the childish patterns are especially common in instances of SCP-913 that weigh less than 2 kilograms and would colloquially be known as baby blankets. While SCP-913 is undoubtedly a living organism, there is some debate as to whether it is itself an animal or perhaps a type of fungal colony. Instances of 799 are incapable of locomotion, lying motionless for long periods of time, and require little in the way of nutrition. What small amount they do need, they appear to be able to gain almost entirely from the organic particles present in normal household dust, such as animal dander and dead human skin cells.
The blanket feeds via a series of minute, filter-feeding mouth-like structures that are spread across the surface of the creature, which wait for nutrients to fall into them, not unlike a sponge on the ocean floor. Instances of SCP-799 can survive for quite a while in this state, and one specimen was noted as having lived for multiple years in a damp attic, subsisting entirely on the small organic particles that would drift down from the rafters above. Should an instance of SCP-799 be forced to go for long periods of time without a source of nutrition, though, like when, for example, it is placed inside of a sealed closet or drawer, it will begin to undergo certain physical changes, which result in it metamorphosing into its predatory form. These changes aren't noticeable from only casual observation and consist of the blanket converting its many filter-feeding mouths into a single, large one that is lined with multiple rows of extremely sharp teeth. The blanket creature also develops a new form of tissue inside its cloth-like structure, one that is similar to muscle and capable of contracting and squeezing. Once its metamorphosis is complete, the instance of SCP-799 will lie in wait for an unsuspecting creature to cover themselves with it or wrap it around their body. Once they do, the blanket will bide its time until they enter a state of rest, usually waiting for them to fall asleep entirely, at which point its feeding phase will begin. Once the creature has detected that its victim is dormant, it will use its newly formed muscle to latch onto them, holding them in place as it opens its tooth-lined maw. It will begin to bite at its confined prey, tearing off several kilograms of flesh, bone, and any other organic material it can, swallowing it, and converting it into a thin slurry that it spreads through its body almost immediately. This traumatic, violent process nearly always leads to the victim dying of blood loss. Within 10 minutes of the attack, the mouth on SCP-799 will have been completely reabsorbed, leaving no signs that it is anything other than a normal, everyday blanket, though one which now mysteriously weighs several kilograms more than it did before. By 40 minutes after the attack, the entire digestive system within SCP-799 will have demetamorphosed back into its original form, with a single digestive tract being changed once again to the many dispersed filter-feeding mouths. While SCP-799 is more than happy to feed on any warm-blooded animal, including humans, it shows no interest in cold-blooded ones or inanimate objects. It appears then that its senses may be limited to only touch and heat, using those as signs that it is now wrapped around a potential meal. Adding to the strangeness of SCP-799 is that it reproduces through budding, like flatworms and corals. When it has absorbed enough nutrients and sufficiently increased its mass, either very slowly through filter feeding or rapidly via its carnivorous phase, it will begin to take on a quilt-like appearance. Over several weeks, one of the quilt squares will puff up and slide off the blanket. This new, smaller instance will resemble a doily or a throw pillow, until it too begins to feed and grow. The new instance is a perfect clone of its parent, identical in every way, and it will eventually grow to a similar size and begin its own reproductive cycle. It is unknown exactly how long it takes SCP-799 to reach full maturity, but the current best guess is that when kept in its filter-feeding phase, an instance will reproduce every 50 to 60 years. Instances of SCP-799 are quite prevalent across the planet, and the SCP Foundation currently has hundreds of examples in containment. Unfortunately, it is unknown just how many still exist in the wild, as it is very difficult to identify instances, with one of the only reliable means being through genetic testing. Should any instances be located, though, they are to be destroyed immediately, as the Foundation already has a large enough population in containment for research purposes, and they pose too much of a risk both in terms of harm and exposure to the general public. SCP-799 has been classified as Euclid, and each instance is kept in its own separate biocontainment cell at Biosite 66. Dust is regularly collected from the on-site D-Class personnel dorms and is sprinkled over the blankets regularly to keep them in their filter-feeding state, though only just enough to hopefully maintain their size and not allow them to reproduce. Should any small cloth objects appear in their containment lockers, it is to be removed immediately and contained separately. SCP-799 isn't the only predatory creature that resembles a cloth good in Foundation containment, and research into possible connections to SCP-1626, the oversized gray-hooded sweatshirt that sends penetrating fibers into anyone unlucky enough to put it on, is ongoing. A face screams in terrible agony. In the darkness, you can't quite make out the shape of its body, but it doesn't look human. It's large and square, almost boxy. Two things you should know. This is a fate worse than death, and it isn't the only one. It's a busy but ordinary day in Hangzhou, China. People are rushing to and from work, going to school, going for walks, buying a hot meal and a cup of tea. But for one young police officer, this is a monumental day. He has been assigned the biggest case of his career, and he grips the stack of files with sweaty, trembling hands as he considers the weight of this moment. It isn't just one case, not really. It's actually 6. 6 separate missing person cases that he's beginning to suspect might be connected. Our detective wishes he could take a moment and transport himself away from these harrowing missing person cases and clear his head. But while he's unable to, we can. Thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Raid Shadow Legends, the hit mobile hero collection RPG played by over 80 million players across the world. And they've got some huge news for both new and returning players, the recently added Live Arena. To tell us about it, I've invited a fellow academic to join us today.
Professor Death Knight here with a lesson about Live Arena, the new PvP mode where you can fight against other players in real time. Sounds terrifying? Well, so's going to the dentist. You should still do it. Live Arena has a draft feature where you can pick and ban champions to fight for you. Teamwork. When you win matches, you'll get Live Arena crests towards unlocking special area bonuses, or so I hear. I'm too afraid to try any of this out. All right, class. Any questions?
Yes, Dr. Bob here. What's your personal strategy for Live Arena?
Well, everyone thinks I'll go in fighting, but nobody expects my charm. My best strength is the gift of gab. So when they try to attack, I'll just be like, nice weather we're having, eh? Nobody'll see it coming.
That doesn't sound like a very effective strategy.
Do not pick me for Live Arena. Seriously, don't. I'm too young to be bone meal.
Well, thank you for your...
Class dismissed! Do we have a bell? Oh, we should totally get a bell.
Class definitely not dismissed, but there's a bunch of brand new content in Raid Shadow Legends related to the animated limited series Call of the Arbiter, including a free legendary champion, the mighty orc warlord Artak. All you have to do to get him is log into Raid for 7 days between now and July 24th. Easy. New players, use my link or scan the QR code right here and get a free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. So just hit my link in the description, and I'll see you on the battlefield. And now, back to the case at hand. The detective was beginning to suspect that the 6 separate missing person cases might be connected. At first glance, they seem unrelated. The victims have very little in common, except one thing. They all worked at the same office. An office that closed 1 month ago, a casualty of international corporate downsizing. No one from his police department has bothered to look into this angle, assuming that it will lead back to more dead leads. But the young officer can't shake the feeling that there is important information waiting for him in that abandoned office building. So, after finishing up his lunch and dabbing the nervous sweat from his brow with a handkerchief from his pocket, he sets off toward the old office building in hopes of cracking the case wide open. As he makes the trip, he considers some other possible theories. Maybe the missing employees skipped town, overwhelmed and depressed from their unexpected job loss. But would they really let their families worry like this? Some of them have wives, husbands, children, all of whom would notice their absence and assume the worst. No, this isn't a simple case of a group of colleagues all vanishing to blow off steam in another city somewhere. Something bad happened. He can just feel it. Maybe they uncovered corporate secrets and someone decided to silence them before they could blow the whistle. But then again, what sort of secrets would be worth killing for at a printer company? It feels worthless trying to guess, trying to fill in the gaps in his knowledge with wild speculation. The only way to find out was to examine the building for himself and see if he can find any clues at all that lead him to the whereabouts of the missing 6. When the young officer reaches the building, he finds the door padlocked shut. Luckily, he prepared for this and brought some industrial-strength bolt cutters that snap the lock into pieces with very little effort. Why lock up the building like this? There can't be anything valuable left inside. To prevent squatters, most likely, he assures himself, brushing off the sense of dread creeping up his spine as he walks inside. As he crosses the threshold of the empty office, the first thing he notices is the smell. It reeks of sulfur and bleach, and a whiff of something electrical that stings the inside of his nostrils with each breath. New possibilities turn over in his mind. Perhaps some sort of deadly workplace accident claimed the lives of the missing when they came back in to collect their belongings and clear out the building. Before he can decide if that theory holds any water, his thoughts are interrupted by a piercing scream coming from a nearby room. The officer isn't alone here. There's someone in the building with him, and they sound like they're in trouble. The officer grabs the taser from his holster and runs toward the sound. He skids to a stop, nearly knocking over a water cooler when he reaches the source of the screaming. There's a man hanging from the wall, screaming over and over again. The officer can barely process what he's seeing. The man is covered in machinery, all whirring and clicking as it works. Next to him, a printer is printing sheet after sheet of paper, and all the while, the man screams. The officer recognizes the man's face from one of the files. This is one of the missing employees. He can't determine what is causing the man such distress, and he tries to ask the man what happened to him. But the man just continues to scream, eyes wide open and wild, rolling around in their sockets, unfocused and unseeing. The officer grabs the man, attempting to remove him from the wall, but he won't budge. It's as if his body is wired into the wall itself, and the harder the officer tugs, the more it appears as if the man's flesh will begin to tear away. The officer stops, turning his attention to the machinery. Perhaps if he unplugs it, he'll be able to remove the man more easily. He starts with the printer, and as he reaches for its plug, he gets a closer look at the paper it continues to spit out. It doesn't look like any paper he's ever seen, and unable to help himself, he reaches out to touch it. It's warm, soft, pliable, and nauseatingly familiar. It isn't paper at all. It's skin. In that moment, all of the officer's training falls out of his mind, replaced with blind terror. He runs from the building as fast as he can, all the way back to the police station, where he tearfully informs his captain about what he found. This is no longer a police matter, his captain tells him. They need to escalate this to a specialized organization. The young officer is sent home, placed on psychiatric leave, and the next day, the SCP Foundation investigates the building it will come to refer to as SCP-2535. SCP-2535 is a former two-story Hewlett-Packard branch office building in the Jiaoshan district of Hangzhou, China. The building's anomalous nature is characterized by the presence of a detailed network of electrical and biological components of unknown origins. The walls of the building's entire first story are covered with 63,512 USB 2.0 standard A sockets, placed in a grid pattern made up of 20-centimeter semi-regular intervals. Each of these sockets is connected to wires running through the walls, but these are no ordinary wires. They consist of a woven mixture of copper strands and human optic nerve tissue, all wrapped in a layer of keratin. In spite of the inclusion of organic material in their structure, the wires have not shown any signs of decay or deterioration since the Foundation discovered SCP-2535. This curious, off-putting mix of the technological and the biological persists throughout the location, and only gets stranger as one moves deeper into the building. If one were to follow the path of these wires, going against their better judgment and the scream of their most primal instincts, they would find that the wires lead to a room on the building's second floor. The room is currently inaccessible, but is thought to have once been the server room. Whatever is blocking the door is large enough that it cannot be budged, and non-intrusive imaging has determined that it is some sort of biological mass. The inside of the former server room, like the wires that lead there, emits heat at a consistent temperature of 47.6 degrees Celsius. Foundation personnel who approached the room have reported a persistent smell of sulfur and ozone coming from inside, as well as the loud sound of a running printer. 317 of the USB socket and power outlets in SCP-2535 are connected to HP brand USB 2.0 compatible devices. Of these devices, 20 have displayed anomalous, potentially ectoentropic functions. But what exactly does that mean? Allow me to elaborate. Just remember, you asked for this. Don't blame me if you aren't able to stomach the details. There are 5 former employees of the Hewlett-Packard Hangzhou branch still located inside of SCP-2535. These employees are in an anomalous sort of status, requiring no sleep, food, or water, in spite of their continued, seemingly endless consciousness. Since the building's discovery in April of 2013, they have not changed in any way, or at least not in any visible way. All attempts to remove these former employees from their, let's call them predicaments, have proven unsuccessful. Allow me to discard any euphemism and explain just what exactly became of these unfortunate workers. First, there is Gua Pingping, the former branch manager. He can be found in the bathroom near the receptionist's desk on the first floor. Goa's head has been forced into the feed tray of a DP DeskJet 1112 printer, which is plugged into the wall. This is troubling for a number of reasons, one of which is that the internal dimensions of this particular DeskJet model's feed tray are not large enough to accommodate a human head, and its components are not strong enough to crush a human skull into a shape that would fit. Nonetheless, Goa's head is firmly lodged into the feed tray. One would assume this would have killed him, but his body continues to move, kicking and thrashing about as if he is in pain. The former assistant branch manager, James Gu Yonggun, is located in the employee pantry on the building's second floor. His body is attached to the wall in a vertical position, held there via 92 20-inch USB 2.0 M-M cables. 5 additional cables have been used to secure the actuating unit of an HP DeskJet 2540 all-in-one printer to Gu's lower jaw. The arm of the actuating unit is also attached to a single HP-10 original ink cartridge in the color black. This ink cartridge is attached into Gu's throat at a continuous rate of 1 stroke per second, and in defiance of the known properties of ordinary ink cartridges, has yet to run out of ink in the years since its discovery. Gu appears to be partially conscious, but is unable to communicate intelligibly when addressed. The former Human Resources Department head, Angel Lee Hui-min, is still in her former office on the second floor, though she no longer performs the duties of her old position. She is still, in a sense, in human resources, or rather, is a human resource. I apologize. Sometimes I have to make a joke to cope with the dark subject matter at hand, but Angel's fate is no laughing matter. Like Gu, she is attached to the wall via a series of USB cables. There is an additional cable, one of unspecified length, inserted into her lower abdomen, which is slightly distended, as though filled with a foreign object. Though a proper analysis has not yet been conducted, the variety of sounds and motions originating from the area seem to indicate that there is a fully operational HP USB single-station thermal receipt printer lodged near her small intestine. As a consequence of this, a never-ending stream of thermal receipt paper is pouring from Angel's mouth at all times, causing her considerable pain and distress. Wang Liang, the former head of the IT department, is permanently placed near the water cooler on the first floor. Like the others, he's bound to the wall by several USB cables, 37 to be exact. There are 12 HP ScanJet 200 scanners pressed against his body, all switched on and running at all times. Next to him, an HP DeskJet 1112 printer is attached to the wall and constantly printing out sheets of something. A closer inspection reveals that it is not paper, but rather sheets of skin. He is conscious, but no successful interview with Wang has been conducted due to his nearly constant, wordless screams of agony. The 5th human subject found in SCP-2535 is Chen Yupeng, who once worked as a trainee technical writer. Now he spends his days in the branch manager's office on the second floor of the building. His body has been wedged into the paper tray and backup paper tray of an HP LaserJet Pro 500 multifunction printer, which has been plugged into the wall via a standard power cable and a 3 feet USB 2.0 M-M cable. His head sticks out of an aperture cut into the side of the printer. The printer itself functions normally, printing copies of the HP Standard Print Quality Diagnostic page and the HP LaserJet 500 Technical Repair Manual, alternating between the two. Since SCP-2535's discovery, it has not run out of either paper or ink. Chen himself is unconscious and shows signs of severe blood loss that, under ordinary circumstances, likely would have resulted in death by now. During a preliminary inspection of the building, one Foundation operative discovered a Canon Pixma E480 printer in the first-floor janitor's closet. This printer was dented and heavily corroded, most likely from the application of liquid bleach, and was also covered with human teeth marks. It has spent the most recent several years attempting to print a 91-page document, but has been unsuccessful due to an apparent jam in its paper tray and feed mechanism. The seams of the printer occasionally ooze human blood, which DNA testing has matched to Yan Xiaoxia, former creative consultant of the Hangzhou branch. SCP-2535 must be sealed away from the public under the guise of health and safety concerns. At least 2 agents are to be stationed in a nearby building at all times for the purposes of observation. Wherever possible, the inside of SCP-2535 must be soundproofed. All material generated by the building's anomalies must be collected and disposed of on a daily basis. So far, these containment measures have been sufficient to keep civilians away from SCP-2535. As far as the friends and family of the missing employees know, their loved ones were never found. It's better that they think of them as lost or dead, rather than learn what truly became of them. As I was poring over the file for SCP-2535, something curious caught my attention. This is not the only anomaly cataloged by the SCP Foundation concerning a branch of the Hewlett-Packard Corporation. I considered leaving well enough alone, but I've never been particularly good at that. When another path presents itself to me, no matter how dark or foreboding it may seem, I cannot resist the urge to see where it will lead. In this case, the path led me to SCP-2211. SCP-2211 was a collection of 4 anomalies discovered in the Shanghai offices of Hewlett-Packard. Notice that I said was rather than is. More on that later. First, allow me to describe the nature of each anomaly. SCP-2211-1 is a 932-megabyte video file titled simply longsmile.wmv. When played, the video depicts a pair of lips on the right edge of the screen. The lips hold a closed-mouth smile for a moment, then open to reveal teeth. At this point in the video, the camera pans to the right, revealing more and more teeth, seemingly forever. Though the length of the video file is listed as 55 seconds, testing revealed that the file will continue to play, revealing endless, maddening rows of teeth for more than 150 straight hours. It will possibly run even longer than that, but testing was through before that could be seen. The video has no audio track. When longsmile.wmv is played for longer than 59 minutes and 20 seconds, the device used to play it will begin to secrete a small amount of human saliva. A sample of saliva was collected for DNA testing, but the results were inconclusive and did not match any known human being on record. SCP-2211-2 is a 2.0 megabyte audio file entitled EYEE-79.WAV. Each playthrough of the audio file is different, but tends to contain bursts of modulated static that go on for 2 to 10 seconds before being cut off for around 0.3 seconds of silence at a time. Like Longsmile, this file can play for a seemingly infinite amount of time, in spite of its listed length of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. When SCP-2211-2 is played for longer than 59 minutes and 20 seconds, the device will begin to secrete a clear fluid, identified as a mixture of water and sodium chloride, amino acids, glutathione, ascorbic acid, and human collagen fibers. Essentially, the device will begin to leak human tears. SCP-2211-3 is a 599 kilobyte file titled r.exe. When this file is run on a computer, it uses up a great deal of memory, causing the device to overheat and its built-in fans to speed up. In spite of the overheating and any damage it might cause, the computer will continue to run until disconnected from its power source. When the file is run for longer than 59 minutes and 20 seconds, air coming through the built-in fans will begin to emit a strong smell of earwax, though no physical traces of earwax have been found. SCP-2211-4 is a USB adapter-powered coffee reheater. When it is plugged into the USB port of a computer, any liquid placed into the container will be heated to approximately 65 degrees Celsius and will also transform into human mucus at a rate of 1 milliliter per minute. This effect is the same whether or not the computer is on. DNA analysis of the mucus revealed that it is a match with the saliva produced by SCP-2211-1. All of this would have been bizarre enough, a series of files and devices that produce human biological material and are seemingly all connected, but something else happened. All instances of SCP-2211 were kept in a pair of containment lockers. However, on June 10, 2014, this containment was breached. I have included a surveillance log transcript that captured the incident. It occurred as follows. Sound of banging metal detected near second floor of Wing B. Door of small item containment locker DAD-2838 is heavily deformed outwards and has experienced a heavy impact from its inside. The sound of banging metal persists for the next 3 minutes as the door of containment locker DAD-2838 begins to burst outwards. Security teams are deployed to cordon off the area and manage the situation. Containment locker DAD-2838 is fully breached from the inside when a segmented humanoid arm emerges, extending to reveal numerous joints along its length. Security teams begin opening fire on the arm to little effect. While the video feed shows that the arm terminates in a 7-fingered hand, personnel present on the scene reported a number of fingers ranging from 5 to approximately 30. The arm repeatedly strikes and breaches the containment locker containing SCP-2211-4, approximately 5 meters from containment locker DAD-2838. It subsequently reaches for SCP-2211-4 and pulls it back into containment locker DAD-2838. No further activity detected. Arm presumed to have dematerialized. Following this incident, the containment locker was examined, but no traces of the many-fingered arm were found inside. Further examination of the locker's contents revealed that SCP-2211-1, 2, and 3 had vanished from their storage media. The files were gone. SCP-2211-4, when tested, no longer displayed any anomalous properties. It was just an ordinary coffee heater, though no staff wanted to use it to heat their coffee, no matter how many times it was washed. Head researcher Min declared SCP-2211 uncontained on August 10, 2014. But there was one more unusual finding. The USB drive that once contained SCP-2211-1 was not empty. There was an untitled text file on the drive. When opened, it simply read, "Got my nose," followed by an unusual text emoticon, ::00, end parentheses, end parentheses. As a man of science, one who has devoted my life to exploring the unexplained and seeking answers to questions that most are afraid to even ask, nothing troubles me quite like a mystery left unsolved. But the tales of these Chinese Hewlett-Packard offices are composed almost entirely of disturbing mysteries, of frayed wires and broken printers, of survivors that cannot tell their stories, and messages we will never get to read. What happened after that Hangzhou branch closed? Was it connected to the findings at the Shanghai branch? Did that mysterious arm grab hold of the Hangzhou team, contorting their bodies into unrecognizable shapes and forcing them to meld with the products they once sold? Or was it once an employee too, broken down into spare parts and trapped as files and desktop beverage warmers? I can't be certain. But I do know this. I'm throwing out my printer. I think I'll just write my notes by hand from now on. I won't necessarily suggest you do the same, but do be careful while handling the machinery. Treat it with respect. After all, you never know if that printer was once as human as you or me. A man opens his mouth to bite a hot dog and suddenly freezes. His eyes widen, and the hot dog drops from his hand, falling to the ground. Ahead, a stampede of people is running toward him, screaming, crying out for help. Behind them, a man walks at an ordinary, casual pace, but something is off. His eyes have a glazed, unfocused look to them, and he keeps shoveling random items into his open mouth, swallowing them down. He eats a clipboard and pen, a discarded shoe, and as the first man watches in horror, the very hungry man grabs the ankle of a fallen member of the crowd and pulls him into his mouth, devouring him. The first man turns to run for his life, only to be knocked to the ground by the rest of the crowd, trying to escape. He struggles to climb back to his feet, and a hand reaches out to take his. When he makes it to his feet, he looks up and sees the hungry man pulling him in, mouth stretching open wide. The sky is a perfect, cloudless blue. The air is warm from the unbroken sunlight, but cooled to the perfect temperature by a gentle breeze. And there is a sense of electricity, excitement, and competition in the air. Throngs of people have gathered together in a makeshift arena, piled into plastic chairs and swarming around concession stands, all training their eyes on the arena's center. What are they here for? Some sort of Olympic Games? A baseball tournament? A horse race? No, it's something greater, something meatier. It is the annual Midsummer Hot Dog Eating Contest, and locals and tourists alike are coming together to see just who can cram the most pork or beef hot dogs and buns down their gullets in front of a roaring crowd. The announcer makes his way to the front of the arena, standing with his arms wide in front of the long table behind him. As he calls out the names of this year's contestants, they file in, each taking his place behind the table. There is the previous year's champion, a burly man with a bushy beard and twinkling eyes, and there is this year's surprise competitor, a skinny 19-year-old college student with a hungry grin. Then there are the lesser-known contestants, a local father who signed up after making a joke with his daughter, an uncle who scrawled his name on the sign-up sheet after a few too many drinks, a recently retired man checking off another item on his golden years bucket list. All have come to the event today with full hearts and empty stomachs, ready to see who the year's victor will be. The announcer riles up the crowd, encouraging them to cheer as loudly as possible to spur on their chosen competitor. All the while, staff are carrying out trays piled high with hot dogs, more hot dogs than most people see in a year, except for the people who just really, really love hot dogs. Each contestant receives a tray of hot dogs, a bucket of water, and an additional empty bucket, just in case, well, you get the idea. With the supplies and competitors all in place, it is time to begin the countdown. The announcer holds up his favorite air horn and calls out,
3, 2, 1, eat!
At the sound of the air horn's blast, the men leap into action, seizing hot dogs from plates and each engaging in their unique competitive eating technique. The previous year's champion employs the method of famous hot dog eating champion Joey Chestnut, dunking his entire hot dog sloppily into his water, then swallowing it as quickly as possible. The new challenger, on the other hand, employs the Solomon method, named for King Solomon. Much like the fabled king suggested doing with a stolen infant, eaters using the Solomon method break the focus of their feasting in half before polishing it off. One of the more casual competitors attempts a divide-and-conquer technique, eating first the dog itself and then the bun. Others employ no specific technique at all, attempting to devour the stack of hot dogs before them, using the same classic eating style they might employ at a family barbecue. This is a grave mistake. One by one, the less prepared competitors drop out, spitting into their buckets, wiping meat sweats from their foreheads, waddling out of the arena while groaning and holding their aching stomachs. Soon, only the two frontrunners remain. But what's this? A challenger approaches. An unassuming black man, clad in a shirt and dress pants, rushes into the arena, his face a mask of single-minded determination, and begins seizing the discarded hot dogs off the table, gobbling them up as fast as he can. The announcer and the rest of the audience watch in stunned disbelief. This is unprecedented, and as exciting as it is, definitely against the rules. This man is not a registered competitor, and he certainly can't join the contest in the champion stretch. Unsure of what else to do, the announcer beckons to the staff on the sidelines, ushering them back toward the table to clear the food and escort this surprise drop-in out of the arena. The audience watches with rapt attention as the staff members attempt to remove the stranger from his place at the table. He shakes his head violently, refusing to go, and snatches the hot dogs away from them, even as they try to clear the trays away. All the while, the remaining competitors standing are attempting to stay the course and finish strong in spite of the interruption. The new, younger man collapses, slumping down onto the table in a hot dog-induced stupor. He has tapped out. The victor is the previous year's champion, with a staggering ultimate tally of 38 hot dogs. As 4 staff members work together to wrestle the stranger out of the arena, the champion steps forward to receive his trophy. The crowd roars as he holds up his arms, grinning ear to ear and basking in yet another win. The announcer can still see the staff struggling with the stranger out of the corner of his eye, but this crowd wants to see their champion crowned, and the show must go on. So he grabs the Hot Dog King sash, the crown made from gold-plated, hot dogs, and even the massive gold trophy. He crowns the winner, placing the sash over his shoulders. Then, as the music swells triumphantly, courtesy of the local high school marching band, the announcer holds up the trophy, sunlight glinting off its shiny surface. It represents so many things: achievement, celebration, the ability to eat just so much meat and not get sick, and now it is time for it to be awarded to the man who earned it. The announcer stretches his arms, handing over the trophy to the contest winner, when all of a sudden, another hand grabs hold of its handle, ripping it from the announcer's grasp. The stranger has returned, somehow freeing himself from the multiple security guards who escorted him away, and he has taken the trophy for himself. But he isn't just attempting to crown himself the Hot Dog King. No, this is not a simple coup-de hot dog. He lifts the trophy up over his head, opening his mouth as wide as it will go, and tears the metal in half with a horrible screeching sound, shoving the pieces into his mouth, chewing and swallowing. By the time the announcer and the champion recover from their shock enough to move again, the trophy is completely gone, vanished into the stranger's belly. After a day of seemingly impossible feats of feasting, the sight of this strange man consuming a truly impossible meal of metal is just too much for the already anxious crowd to take. The arena erupts into absolute chaos as people spill out of their seats en masse, fleeing the area. The champion, however, does not turn and run. He feels robbed of his victory. Though it may have occurred in an utterly bizarre fashion, he won't stand for this kind of disrespect. He has trained all year for this moment, only to watch his trophy be eaten right in front of him. He marches right up to the stranger and pokes him in the chest, demanding to know who he thinks he is. What gives him the right to crash the hot dog eating contest, interrupt the proceedings, and upstage his victory by chowing down on the trophy? The man doesn't answer him, so the champion continues to berate him, wagging his finger in his face. The stranger's eyes follow the finger, and slowly he opens his mouth. There is a sudden chomp, and the champion screams, holding his hand to his chest, using his shirt to stem the bleeding. He turns to run with the rest of the crowd, but it's too late. The stranger's hand clamps down on his shoulder, holding him in place with a surprising strength. The only thing he sees before his life is snuffed out is the stranger's wide-open mouth, before everything goes dark with another sickening chomp. All the while, the crowd's terror rises to a fever pitch at the horrible sight. They trample each other as they scramble to vacate the area, shoving strangers and loved ones alike out of the way in a bid to escape this mysterious equal-opportunity omnivore with an appetite for far more than just hot dogs. Some manage to escape, running far enough from the arena that they can stop to catch their breaths and glance back at the ones who were not so lucky. Those who tripped and fell in the madness, who had the wind knocked out of them by an elbow to the gut from one of their neighbors, those with weak ankles or who hadn't tied their shoes carefully enough. All of these poor, unfortunate souls are next on the menu for the stranger, who devours them one by one, rarely even stopping to chew. As one surviving woman watching from a distance pulls out her phone to call 911, she can't escape noticing the parallels to the contest itself, the way the stranger eats with a singular focus on consuming as much as possible. There's no pause to enjoy the meal, but there is no sadism or malice in the act either, just the sheer, undeniable drive to keep eating. The woman's call to the police is one of the strangest moments of her life and utterly baffles the local police department. "Ma'am, please calm down," one officer repeats again and again. "What do you mean there's a man eating people?" "I mean exactly what I said," she shouts. "A man showed up at the hot dog contest and started eating people. Please, you have to do something." "I think this is above our pay grade, miss," another officer chimes in. "You think we should call, the first officer trails off. Who? The woman demands, but the line goes dead before she can ask another question. The police are clearly no help, and she isn't about to stick around and see just how big this stranger's appetite is. She tried to save the others, but now she needs to save herself. She runs all the way home without another glance back. Meanwhile, the local police did make that mysterious call, and an SCP Foundation mobile task force is currently en route to the scene. By the time they arrive, the park is a ghost town, with nothing but the blood-stained grass and abandoned arena to suggest that something horrible ever happened here at all. But these aren't some bumbling local police officers who have no idea what to do with a man-eating anomaly. This team has seen enough bizarre sights to fill a lifetime, and another lifetime after that. They spy a trail of sticky red footprints leading away from the arena. At first, they assume that the substance is blood, but a closer examination reveals that it is, in fact, ketchup. They track the savory footprints away from the scene of the day's unsavory events, following them to a nearby warehouse. Judging from the scattered wooden beams, rustling metal, and boarded-up windows, this place has been abandoned for some time. The perfect place for an anomaly to hide away. If they weren't certain, the sound of someone inside biting through sheets of metal is plenty of indication that this is the right place. With no time to waste, they break down the door of the warehouse, weapons drawn and ready. They follow the sound of the chewing, splitting up to apprehend the subject from all available directions. The shriek of tearing metal echoes through the building, bouncing off the walls and creating a cacophony that is difficult to track. They do their best to follow the sound, but quickly veer off in separate directions in an attempt to cover as much ground as possible. One operative confronts the stranger just as he is reaching for another piece of metal. He watches as the man takes a massive bite out of the steel, a bite that should have shattered his teeth and broken his jaw. Instead, a cartoonish bite mark is taken out of the metal. He approaches the stranger, who, upon locking eyes with him, begins to shake his head, still chewing. The MTF operative ignores this visual cue, approaching the man and attempting to physically restrain him. This, like the confrontation with the champion before, is cut off with a fateful chomp, and the operative screams ringing out through the warehouse, alerting his teammates to his unfortunate fate. The screams suddenly go silent, and another MTF operative stops cold, listening as the sound of chewing draws nearer and nearer. He spins around to face the presence behind him and spots the stranger standing there. The otherwise ordinary man is polishing off the tip of a steel beam, grimacing as he swallows it. The operative lifts his weapon, pointing it at the subject. The operative tells him to stand down and come quietly. The hungry man pleads, wide-eyed, for the operative to turn and run while he still can. He takes small, reluctant steps toward the operative, muttering that he can't stop. The operative brandishes his weapon again, barking another order for the man to stop. Before he can make another move, the stranger snatches the weapon out of his hand, opens his mouth, and swallows it. He winces as he does, but does not stop until the weapon is completely devoured. All at once, he lets out a loud belch, his knees buckle, and he slumps to the ground. He rubs his stomach, wipes his brow, and sighs heavily. "I'm so sorry about that. I was just so hungry I couldn't help it." The man shakes his head sadly. "I hope you can get a new weapon. And I'm sorry about your friend, too." "You said you couldn't help it. Why'd you stop?" The stranger shrugs, sighs again, and simply says, "Well, because I was full." After a bit of convincing, and a test confirming that the subject's strength and bite force has returned to ordinary human levels, the remaining mobile task force agreed to bring him into Foundation custody unharmed, though restrained. They pile into one of the SCP Foundation's trademark unmarked vans and set off toward the nearest Foundation site. About 1 hour into the trip, the subject begins to lament his growling stomach, asking if they could possibly stop somewhere for a bite to eat. Ordinarily, this is against protocol, but after what happened to their teammate, the task force members aren't taking any chances. They pull into a fast food drive-thru and permit the subject to order whatever he wants. They'll declare it as a business expense later. 5 burgers, 5 fries, 5 tacos, 5 pies, 5 cokes, 10 tater tots, 10 tenders, 5 shakes, 5 pancakes, 5 jalapeno poppers, and 5 baked potatoes later, the task force successfully reached the Foundation site with their newest subject, SCP-913. SCP-913 appears to be an average African-American man around middle age. Though his appearance is completely ordinary, his metabolism is unnaturally fast. He requires the recommended daily caloric intake for an average human being every 2 hours and has an unusually high internal temperature, though the specific number has been redacted from his official file. If he does not meet his calorie requirement for a given 2-hour period, he will enter a trance state in which he is unable to control himself. In this state, he will break down and ingest any solid matter in his line of sight. This includes matter that would ordinarily be indigestible, including wood, plastic, and metal. In this state, his appetite does not distinguish between living and non-living subjects. When he is in this hunger-driven state, he is aware of all his actions, but cannot stop himself, even when he eats dense materials that cause him extreme discomfort. If this state hits while the subject is sleeping, he will be forced awake. In addition to his anomalous appetite, SCP-913 can rend objects at an estimated force of 3,000 newtons and can bite objects with an estimated force of 5,000 newtons when eating them. Whenever he is not in his trance state, he cannot replicate this strength. An examination of SCP-913's liver tissue showed that it is capable of producing new enzymes in response to foreign material, allowing his body to digest matter that should be highly dangerous to consume. These enzymes metabolize the substrate at an efficiency of approximately 98%, detoxifying any drugs or toxins consumed by the subject during the hunger state or otherwise. This includes, but is not limited to, amnestics and anesthetics. When SCP-913 was first discovered, he was wearing a shirt and dress pants, both with the brand name Doctor's Orders sewn onto their tags. SCP-913 has no tattoos aside from one on his right calf, which reads, Mr Hungry, from Little Misters by Dr. Wondertainment. Just in case you aren't aware, the Little Misters are a line of humanoid anomalies created by the mysterious Dr. Wondertainment Corporation, including the fish-headed Mr. Fish, the candy-coated Ms. Sweetie, and Mr. Life and Mr. Death, who is every bit as existentially upsetting as he sounds. The purpose of these creations is currently unknown, though, like many Dr. Wondertainment products, their existence invites endless speculation. SCP-913 must be contained in a customized humanoid containment cell lined with 1 meter thick carbon steel. 913 is to be provided standard furnishings for his containment cell, coinciding with the usual necessities for a comfortable humanoid dwelling. He may be given pre-recorded entertainment materials, such as concerts, films, and television shows upon request. The cell may be accessed via a reinforced carbon steel door. Once every 2 hours, SCP-913 is provided with 1 nutritional supplement as specified in Document 913-2. I attempted to locate a copy of 913-2 for further details on said nutritional supplement, but access to it appears to be limited to researchers assigned to SCP-913. While the subject is sleeping, nutrition is provided to SCP-913 via a central venous catheter that must be changed once every 3 months. These measures allow SCP-913 to receive the calories that he needs to avoid entering a hunger state, ensuring the safety of everyone on site, as well as his own comfort. Like the rest of the Little Misters, SCP-913 presents a puzzle that may never be solved. I could spend my limited time on this Earth wondering why Dr. Wondertainment would create a being that seems to serve no purpose other than eating as much as possible, lest he unwillingly destroy the environment around him. But I believe that would be a waste of time. Why does Dr. Wondertainment do anything that they do? Why create a woman who can turn men into candy soldiers? Why create an ordinary man with a fish head, a tiny top hat, and a Boston accent? The personal motivations of Dr. Wondertainment, whether they are an individual or a massive conglomerate, are as inscrutable to me as the meaning of life itself, or the reasons why a person would want to eat more than 2 hot dogs in one sitting.
A young woman steps onto her bathroom scale. She holds her breath and squeezes her eyes shut, afraid to see the results as she listens to the dial spinning. When it slows to a stop, she opens her eyes and looks down. She balks at the result. 150 pounds! That's unacceptable in her eyes. She steps off the scale and examines her reflection in the full-length mirror. In truth, her weight is far from out of control, but when she looks at herself, she can't help but see flaws. The subtle ring of pudge around her middle, the way her butt sticks out just a little too far for her liking, the very faint thickness around her cheeks and chin that hint at her history of snacking. As she leaves the bathroom, she reflects on her situation. Of course she's gaining weight. How could it be any other way? For the last 2 years, she's been in lockdown during a pandemic, and she's barely left her apartment. She let her gym membership lapse, and instead of cycling to work, she's instead taking the easy way out by just driving. And it's not like she gets much exercise in her free time either. During these last 2 years of isolation, she's mostly stayed in and watched television. She's discovered a particular love for trashy daytime talk shows and court dramas. Intellectually, she knows that they're the equivalent of junk food, but at the same time, there is a certain mindless charm to them. She would be embarrassed to admit it to any of her friends, but she does enjoy just turning off her brain and absorbing some silly talk show about professional stunt dwarves or Satan-worshipping furry juggalos. That sort of entertainment has been a boon to get her through the tough times. Nevertheless, it's time to make a change. She promises herself that she's going to get into shape. Today, instead of vegging out on the couch, she's going to make an effort. She's going to go out and get some exercise, and she tells herself she's going to watch those extra pounds melt away right before her eyes. She hopes that her old gym clothes will still fit her. After all, she's definitely put on some extra weight since her last trip to the gym. After rummaging through her drawers, she finds what she's looking for: her spandex gym shorts and sports bra. She quickly changes her clothes and is relieved to see that, although they might be a little snugger than she would like, they still fit her pretty well. That's a good sign. She probably won't even have to work very hard to get herself down to her ideal weight. It's all a matter of willpower, she tells herself. I was fit before, so that means I should be able to do it again. All I have to do is avoid temptation. I'll just have to make sure I stay active instead of watching trash TV all day. After all, I don't want to rot my brain too much. On the first day, she actually does an admirable job of sticking to her plan. She cycles to work, enjoying the fresh air and the reassuring post-workout burn in her legs that let her know that she's making progress. She throws away all the junk food in her refrigerator and goes shopping for healthy fruits and vegetables. And, most important of all, she limits her television time. She knows that trashy TV is probably her biggest addiction, even more than junk food, so she needs to be careful of that. On the second day, though, she notices something strange. She starts off with a simple, healthy breakfast, just some granola and a glass of juice. It's barely enough to satisfy her, but she knows that she has to make sacrifices if she expects to actually lose any weight. After breakfast, she decides to go out for a jog. As she's out on the street, she's overcome with sudden hunger. Of course, that's to be expected. She's on a diet now, so it's going to take some time to adjust to these smaller meals. She puts her hand to her rumbling stomach and grimaces. She's never felt this hungry before. If she didn't know better, she would think that she hadn't eaten for a week with the amount of pain that she's feeling. In fact, she's actually starting to feel a little woozy, and she has to lean against a light post to keep from fainting. She shakes her head to clear her thoughts. Okay, she thinks, I must have misjudged how many calories I need to get me through a morning. Her eyes stray to a nearby coffee shop. She sighs in relief. She thinks to herself, I'll just pop in there and get myself a small snack, just a little something to keep my blood sugar up. She walks into the cafe and gets in line. As she waits, she can't help but stare at the rows of pastries on display under the glass. They all look delicious, and she is really hungry. She fully intends to only get a bagel with a little smear of cream cheese, but when she gets to the counter, she finds herself ordering way too much food. I'd like 2 scones, 3 danishes, and a bear claw, she says. Also a large super raspberry frappuccino with extra syrup and whipped cream. The words just tumble out of her mouth, almost as if it's not her saying them, but rather some other voice speaking through her mouth. What the? I didn't say that, she stammers. The clerk behind the counter eyes her strangely, and the young woman feels too embarrassed to protest further. She steps aside and waits for her order, pondering the strange event that just happened. Is she possessed? She's not a superstitious person, but she can't think of any other explanation for what just happened. She can admit to herself that she has broken down and lost to temptation over a tasty snack in the past, but this is ridiculous. Eventually, when the clerk hands her the order, she rationalizes the whole thing away. I must just be having a hunger hallucination, she says to herself. Obviously, I need to be a little more careful about not being so strict about my diet.
I'm sure if I just eat sensibly, I won't have an experience like that again. Her stomach grumbles again, reminding her of the original reason why she stepped into this coffee shop. She retreats to a table in the corner and tears open the bag. She wolfs down her pastries with gusto and slurps at her rich, creamy drink. When she's finished, she sighs in satisfaction, although the uncomfortable full feeling in her belly reminds her of her predicament. She only meant to eat enough to keep her from fainting, but instead, she's eating herself silly, and it's only day 2 of the diet. This does not bode well. Okay, she tells herself, this is my last cheat. From now on, I'm going to be serious about this diet. She stands up and leaves the cafe, ready to complete the rest of her jog. But then, something even stranger happens. On the television, the matriarch of the family is furious. She has forbidden her daughter from marrying the gardener because she believes that he is too low class for her high-born daughter. But what she doesn't realize is that her daughter is in love and that she is determined to make it work. The daughter and the gardener have eloped, and the matriarch is hiring a private detective to track them down. Meanwhile, the matriarch's long-lost twin brother, whom she thought died in a plane crash in the tropics, has actually been alive the entire time. He has been in a South American hospital recovering from amnesia, but now he returns to the family estate, ready to claim his share of the inheritance. These events are all noted by the family's shady lawyer, who has big plans to usurp the family fortune himself. Unbeknownst to the family, he is actually secretly working for their mortal enemies and business rivals to destroy them. The young woman laughs, shoving a handful of potato chips into her mouth. Oh man, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes now. That lawyer is playing them all like fiddles. Suddenly, she startles, as if she's just waking up. Where is she? Wasn't she just in that coffee shop? How is it that she's at home? And why is she eating potato chips? She was sure that she threw out all the junk food in the house. She must have bought a bag on her way back home from jogging, but she literally cannot remember it. And what is she doing now? Watching television and eating junk food? In disgust, she grabs the remote and shuts off the TV. She was supposed to be jogging, and instead, she's sitting at home and watching stupid soap operas. The thing that worries her the most is her apparent blackout. She remembers nothing about her trip home from the coffee shop, although the evidence of the potato chip bag indicates that she must have stopped at a convenience store or supermarket on the way home. How could she forget something like that? I really must be having a blood sugar issue, she tells herself reassuringly, even though deep down, she knows that can't be the case. She had the blackout after eating the pastries at the coffee shop, so that can't be the cause. But she really doesn't want to think about that, so she puts it out of her head with a renewed promise to commit to her exercise and fitness program. Over the next few days, she makes a valiant effort to keep her promise. She cycles when she can, she jogs when she remembers, and yet, the blackouts continue. And no matter where she is when she loses her memory, she always recovers in the same place. Back home on her couch, always in the middle of eating some fatty junk food, always staring at the television set. Sure, she's always had an unhealthy television habit, and she knows that trashy talk shows and silly soap operas are her biggest weakness. But it doesn't make any sense that she would be seeking them out when she's in some kind of fugue state, right? As the weeks roll by, the young woman finds that her weight keeps rising. When she steps onto the bathroom scale, she's shocked to see that the dial points to 200 pounds. She's doing everything right, she thinks. How is that possible? How is it possible that she's ballooned up an extra 50 pounds since deciding to slim down? She can't fit into her old gym clothes anymore. She can barely tug the spandex shorts up to her thighs, and even if she could, she's afraid that they're going to split apart. In desperation, she switches to an old stretchy sweatsuit. It's the only thing that she owns that still fits her. This is just a temporary setback, she tells herself as she stares at her bloated reflection in the bathroom mirror. I just have to work harder. And she does. Or does she? When she goes to ride her bike, she finds that it's no longer strong enough to support her weight. She can't perch on the seat comfortably, and the steel body frame starts to creak when she rests her full weight upon it. She steels her resolve. Sure, it might be embarrassing to go out in public wearing an ill-fitting sweatsuit and riding a bike groaning under her bulk, but she really has no choice. This time, she's going to do it. And she probably did ride her bike to work, right? She's not sure. The next thing that she knows, she's back at home, spread across the couch, basking in the comforting glow of the television. The floor is covered in empty bags and cartons, and her face is slathered with crumbs and sauce. The last thing that she remembers is that she was just about to go for a bike ride, but now she's back at home, and it looks like she just completely ruined her diet. She lifts her arm with some effort and stares at her watch. She's lost almost a whole day. That's the longest blackout yet. She must have gone out cycling and made her way home, where she decided to reward herself for her strenuous efforts with a little snack. That's the only logical explanation. She tries to reassure herself that maybe she's past the worst of it, but she finds that these mysterious blackouts keep happening. They happen while she's at work, while she's at the gym, while she's out cycling, but she always comes to in the same place, sitting on her sofa at home, in front of the TV, surrounded by the debris of a massive meal. Again, she wonders if maybe she's having some sort of reaction to her new low-calorie diet. Maybe she's been cutting back so far on her food intake that she's starting to have fainting spells. Maybe her diet food is tainted in some way. But that doesn't explain why she keeps gaining weight. The scale in her bathroom doesn't lie. It keeps reporting higher and higher numbers, and as much as she tries to reassure herself that it must just be broken, her ever-tightening clothes and ever-widening reflection tell her otherwise. Her trips to the gym become less and less frequent, as she finds that other patrons have started to stare and whisper about her. Are they laughing at her for not being able to control her weight? Are they whispering about how her new flab is spilling from the confines of her sweatsuit? She can't even run on the treadmill for more than a few minutes without being completely winded, and she's too wide to balance on her bike now. The young woman has grown absolutely massive, to the point that she completely fills the whole couch. She chews her way through yet another bag of potato chips, her eyes never straying from the ever-chattering television set. She barely moves from the spot, her tremendous girth sinking into a permanent groove in the cushions as the couch springs groan. She barely notices, however, because she's much too intent on enjoying herself. She loves to eat, and every bite brings her untold joy, her taste buds tingling with delight. She is constantly full, so much so that she feels slightly sick, so bloated that she feels like she might just burst, but she's powerless to resist the siren call of junk food. She scarfs down entire boxes of cookies and cartons of ice cream without a thought, having turned into the very definition of a mindless eater. Only occasionally does she rouse herself from this stupor of gorging, to reach for her telephone, to order more takeout or more grocery delivery, always choosing the most calorie-laden options. Other than eating, her attention is completely devoted to her television set. She watches a constant stream of daytime talk shows, laughing along with the studio audience as the hosts parade out an assortment of society's biggest freaks. Sometimes she'll switch the channel to watch soap operas, becoming so wrapped up in the ridiculous plot twists and melodramatic acting that she completely forgets the passage of time. Her bicycle stands propped against the wall in the hallway, completely forgotten and untouched now for months. At this point, all thoughts of losing weight have utterly evaporated, and all that she cares about is satisfying her appetites for junk food and junk television. One day, she suddenly shakes her head and looks down at herself in horror, as if seeing herself for the first time. "What the?" she says in disbelief. She drops her half-eaten carton of ice cream and grabs at her fleshy middle with her hands, as if to make sure that it's all her and not some kind of crazy dream. Her hands sink deep into her new flesh, and she realizes to her shock that indeed she has eaten herself into morbid obesity. "How is this possible? I can't be this big. I was only... Her words trail off as the sound of an organ sting from the soap opera on TV diverts her attention. Within seconds, her eyes have glazed over, and her hands move to pick up the dropped carton of ice cream. Her worries about her growing size forgotten, she's now only concerned with watching until the next commercial break. It might seem unbelievable that someone could undergo such a startling physical and mental transformation, but what that young woman experienced has led to her being classified by the Foundation as SCP-2611. SCP-2611 is, as you might have expected, a young woman currently weighing approximately 500 pounds. Her mobility is limited due to her weight, although SCP staff encourage her to take light exercise whenever possible, in hopes of preventing her mobility from deteriorating further. She also suffers from several health issues related to her weight and lifestyle, including diabetes, for which she is receiving treatment by Foundation personnel. Her awareness of her situation and surroundings is severely limited, as she spends most of her time in a stupor, but when she is lucid, she believes that she is in a special facility receiving treatment for her weight problem. In reality, SCP-2611 is under observation because of SCP-2611-1. SCP-2611-1 is a mass of sentient fat located on SCP-2611's left side. SCP-2611-1 has become integrated with several of SCP-2611's vital organs, making it too dangerous to attempt to remove SCP-2611-1 via liposuction or other means. SCP-2611-1 has gradually exerted increasing control over the mind and actions of its host, to the point that SCP-2611 is only fully conscious for 1 to 2 hours daily. The rest of the time, SCP-2611-1 is fully in control of its host's behavior. Prior to coming to the SCP facility, SCP-2611-1 influenced its host to consume massive amounts of calories, leading to the mysterious and sudden weight gain that we observed earlier. This was possibly an attempt by SCP-2611-1 to increase its own size and influence, but as of yet, its reasons, as well as how it exerts control over its host, are unknown. When in control, SCP-2611-1 can speak through its host, communicating in standard American English. SCP-2611's access to food has been limited since her arrival at the Foundation, so as to prevent her weight gain from accelerating to dangerous levels. Other than eating, SCP-2611-1's main interest appears to be daytime television. Attempts to communicate with SCP-2611-1 have so far met with little success due to the Anomalies' limited attention span for anything other than the minutiae of daytime television. In a conversation with one researcher, however, SCP-2611-1 let slip that it preferred daytime television to the programming watched by, quote, that other guy, suggesting that it lived inside a different host before it eventually took up residence within the body of SCP-2611. At another point, while in the middle of a conversation about a court drama, SCP-2611-1 suddenly announced, kill it now, I don't care if I die." Staff believe that this might not have been SCP-2611-1 at all, but rather the voice of SCP-2611 trying to break through the hypnotic control of her parasite to call for help. At this time, no drastic action is recommended until further observations can be made. SCP-2611-1 does not appear to be contagious, and the way that it bonds with the host is unknown, so it is currently classified as safe. At the moment, SCP-2611-1 is the only known instance of its kind. However, considering rising levels of obesity worldwide, it is not unfathomable to think that there could be countless other instances influencing the behavior of other hosts to dedicate their lives to consuming food and television. Who knows? It's not like most of us would need that much convincing.
The young couple held hands as they walked through the forest, the only light coming from the full moon which streamed down between the branches.
The young woman is riveted by her friend's story. She's never been a fan of ghost stories, she scares too easily, but her friends insisted.
But what they didn't know was that there was something else out there in the forest, something watching them.
The young woman can't help but look around, scanning the forest to see if there's anything out there watching her. But it's too dark to see anything past the dim ring of light cast by the campfire.
Just then, something emerged from the forest. The couple had no idea that it was just feet behind them, matching them step for step. Slowly, it began to reach out towards them.
"What was it?" the young woman instinctually asked.
It was the Gashadokuro.
The young woman screams in fear as she is grabbed from behind by a skeleton. But of course, the laughing of her friends clues her in immediately that this is not a real Gashadokuro. It's just her stupid friend in a mask. No one can contain their laughter. Even the young woman has to laugh a little. As her friend takes off his cheap skull mask, she playfully hits him in the arm.
"You jerk! You should have seen the look on your..."
The gigantic shrieking skeleton leaps from the woods and picks up the young man, shoving him straight into his mouth and consuming him, the boy crying out as his bones are snapped between its enormous jaws. Everyone screams and turns to run, but another colossal skeleton emerges from the forest, picking up two of the group, one in each hand, before smashing them together over and over, leaving nothing but a tenderized pile of flesh between its bony fingers that it then begins to devour. The young woman doesn't know what to do. She's petrified with fear, unable to move or even think. She's grabbed from behind and turns to see her friend who is telling the story. "Come on, we have to go!" She still doesn't move. She can't tear herself away from watching the horror that's playing out in front of her. But he grabs her hand and forcefully pulls her into the forest behind him. As they run through the woods, they can hear the sounds of their friends being eaten by the enormous skeletons. There's nothing they can do to help them, though. All they can do is run. The two sprint as fast as they can through the thick, dark forest, jumping over fallen trees, hoping that there's solid ground on the other side. The young woman's foot catches in a root, and she falls hard to the ground. Her friend stops and quickly comes back. As he is helping her stand up out of the mud, they both notice something. A sound. The heavy thuds of another giant skeleton. And it's getting closer to them. "Come on, we have to keep going!" With a loud shriek, a huge bony hand emerges from the forest and grabs the young man. The young woman watches as he is lifted 100 feet into the air and stuffed whole into the gargantuan skeleton's mouth. She steps slowly backwards, knowing that she will soon meet the same fate, until the earth disappears beneath her feet. She tumbles down the hillside, somersaulting end over end, crashing through the brush on the hillside until dropping over an embankment. If the fall down the hill knocked her out, then the drop over the embankment was enough to wake her back up. Her wits come back just enough for her to roll under the embankment's ledge, and not a moment too soon. She huddles under the ledge, and watches as the two skeletons stride over her hiding place and continue on deeper into the forest. She listens until the sounds of their thudding steps disappear. She doesn't know what to do. Should she try to get back to the campsite and see if any of her friends are still alive? If they are, they might need her help. But what if there are more of these things out there? What if they come back, looking for her? Her mind races, unsure of what to do, and she has trouble thinking clearly. Her ears are ringing from her tumble down the hillside, and her teeth audibly chatter in fear. As she debates her next move, trying to make sense of the nightmare she's found herself in, she suddenly notices something. A shadow cast by the moonlight begins to grow on the ground in front of her. That's when she realizes something else. It's not her teeth that are chattering. The sound is coming from somewhere else. She stands up and turns around to see a huge skull slowly rising up behind her. The giant skeleton, this one even bigger than the others, reaches out towards her. The girl closes her eyes, preparing to meet her fate as the skeleton starts to shriek. But it's a different kind of sound. She opens her eyes and is almost blinded by the intense white light on the skeleton's face. It sounds like it is shrieking in pain from the light being cast on it, and she's forced to turn away and shield her eyes. As she does so, she sees the source of light. It's a man in a uniform. He looks like some sort of tactical police officer, but instead of a gun, he's holding an enormous flashlight that he's pointing at the skeleton. More men who are dressed just the same emerge from the woods, blasting the skeleton with more light. It continues shrieking but seems helpless to do anything. She watches as the skeleton seems to lose its form, slowly disintegrating in the light, until eventually it disappears completely. Later, the young woman is sitting in the back of a van with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. One of the policemen, at least she thinks he must be a policeman, brings her a hot drink. She still can't believe what she saw that night. The monstrous creatures that killed and ate her friends. It felt like it wasn't real, like she was watching a movie play out. Were those Gashadokuro? She asks. A man in a white lab coat looks up from a nearby table where he had been working on something. She thinks he must be a doctor of some kind. Yes, he tells her, or something similar to them. Maybe they inspired the myth of the Gashadokuro. Maybe the myth inspired them. We simply don't know. She asks. All my friends are dead, he interjects. I know this is hard for you. Getting chased by giant anomalous skeletons and watching your friends eaten alive would be tough for anyone to deal with. The young woman starts to sob, the weight of the moment finally hitting her. But I have some good news, he tells her. She sniffs and looks up at the doctor. Believe it or not, I've seen this thing happen a lot. And you don't have to worry, because you're not going to remember any of this. Ouch! The young woman cries, and looks down to see that he has jabbed her in the thigh with a syringe. She tries to push him away, but she's already feeling weak and disoriented. She sways a little before her eyes shut, and she passes out. The young woman wakes in the cheery morning light of her own bedroom. She yawns and stretches, the strange dream about skeletons in the forest already drifting from her mind. Konnichiwa, I'm Dr. Bob, and today's file is a terrifying anomalous entity referred to in Japan as the Gashadokuro, but known by the SCP Foundation as SCP-2863, the Starving Skeletons. SCP-2863 is not just one, but an entire population of entities that resemble gigantic human skeletons. These enormous bony creatures' size can vary, but on average they are approximately 30 meters tall. While their exact number is unknown, over 200 separate individual instances have been identified and cataloged, with each having distinctive markings, such as their bones having different types of damage or burn marks present. SCP-2863 instances are currently found exclusively in Japan, where they will appear only after sunset. It is still unknown if the skeletons are sapient, though they do appear sentient as they engage in their primary behavior of hunting down and consuming humans. Despite their enormous size, they are capable of moving very quietly when they want to, though there have been reports from survivors of their appearance being preceded by a rattling-like sound, which may be their own teeth or giant bones hitting against each other. Once they have caught a human, they will immediately devour them, with the human's blood appearing to be absorbed directly into their bones, since they lack any digestive organs. It is unknown if they require the blood of humans for sustenance, or if their predatory behavior is motivated by something else. Monitoring and control of SCP-2863 instances was previously the responsibility of the Imperial Japanese Anomalous Matters Examination Agency. The IJAMEA, which as the name suggests, was Imperial Japan's answer to the SCP Foundation, tasked with investigating the strange anomalies within their own borders for the benefit of the Empire. Several of the IJAMEA agents who had been investigating the Gashadokuro at the end of World War II transferred to the SCP Foundation when the Anomalous Matters Examination Agency was disbanded, and continued their work on the anomaly. They also provided their original files on the anomaly, which gave the Foundation their first information on the giant anomalous skeletons. According to the IJAMEA's translated file, Gashadokuro are created by mass death, by the concentrated suffering of hundreds. While the Gashadokuro will eventually fade, they remain for centuries after their creation, lingering until their sorrow has diffused and faded. There is no way to hasten this process. The IJAMEA file also explained that while conventional weaponry is useless against the anomalous skeletons, light can be used to banish the creatures, and either natural daylight or man-made light will suffice. When exposed to light, the skeletons will start to lose their corporeal form until they fade away completely. This doesn't kill instances of SCP-2863, though. It only temporarily neutralizes them, and appearances of the same instance will often be reported the very next night. Just as the IJAMEA had noted in their file, the SCP Foundation also made the connection between SCP-2863 and locations of mass suffering. While Imperial Japan's Anomalous Investigation Unit identified 203 instances of SCP-2863, the Foundation has since become aware of 3 others, each of which were found at sites connected to death and destruction. The first new instance was found near Nanjing, China, the location of an especially brutal massacre during the Second World War that may have resulted in as many as 300,000 deaths. It's believed that the entity first appeared in this location in 1938, just after the massacre, while the city was still under the control of Imperial Japan. This has led some to speculate that the locations where Gashadokuro appear are inherently tied to the borders of Japan as a nation and have fluctuated with geopolitical changes. The second was discovered several kilometers from Fukuoka City in Japan, a city that saw heavy firebombing by Allied forces during the war. The third was identified in 2011 in the Tohoku region of Japan, which is where the Fukushima nuclear disaster occurred. Each of these new instances appeared to bear injuries consistent with someone who suffered through the nearby tragedies, with the first showing evidence of crushed bones, the second appearing to have suffered intense burning, and the third missing teeth, which is common in cases of extreme radiation poisoning. These specific injuries add further evidence of the connection the Gashadokuro may have to human misery. The impermanent nature of SCP-2863 and their ability to manifest even after being neutralized has made long-term containment of this anomaly all but impossible, and they have been classified as Keter. In the event that an instance is spotted, Mobile Task Force Omicron 3 is dispatched to the area, where they will attempt to neutralize the entity through the use of high-powered floodlights. Any civilians who are exposed to SCP-2863 and survive are given Class A amnestics so that they can hopefully move on with their lives and forget their horrifying encounter with the starving skeletons.
These winters are getting worse every year, that's for sure. The old cattle rancher doesn't know if it's the climate changing, God's judgment arriving, or if he's just getting older and struggling to keep up. Probably a strong mix of all of it. Whatever the cause, it doesn't change the facts. It's deathly cold out there. His ailing, elderly ma's health continues to deteriorate. He hasn't heard from his delivery driver Jorge in days, and on top of it all, his loyal dog Maribel is out there barking into the darkness of the barn. The rancher heads out to fetch her. He doesn't know what he'd do if she froze. He whistles, but she doesn't look back at him. She just carries on barking up that road into the snowy night. The rancher wades through the snow and peers in the direction she's looking. "There's nothing there, girl. Get inside." But Maribel keeps barking. She's insisting. He looks again. Is that? The rancher takes off running up the road. All thoughts of cold immediately gone from his mind, he races towards the figure as fast as he can. His frozen fingers fumble at the zipper on his parka. Icy wind stabs the insides of his lungs. Maribel shoots off ahead of him. There, he pulls the zipper down and wrestles the thick coat off of his shoulders just as he reaches the tiny figure. He drops to his knees and throws the coat over the shoulders of the little girl standing alone in the snow. Quick as he can, he wraps it tightly around her, pulling the hood up and over her head. He takes her tiny shoulders in his hands and gives her a shake. "You okay? Hello? Can you hear me?" The girl sways for a moment, then collapses. He catches her and in one deft motion scoops her into his arms and takes off back down the road in the direction of his farm. Where the hell had she come from? There are no buildings around here for miles. No one uses that road except Jorge. And in this weather, she couldn't have walked all the way over those mountains. She'd have frozen solid. He bites the finger of a glove and pulls it off. With his bare hand, he clasps one of hers.
By the feel of her skin, she pretty much is frozen solid already. He needs to get her warmed up, now. He kicks open the front door and bundles inside with a flurry of snowflakes and an anxious dog at his heels. The fire's not quite dead yet, so he rushes over to the hearth and lays the little girl down next to it. He can barely see her at all wrapped up in his enormous coat. She doesn't seem to be moving. "Ma, I'm home. I found someone." The rancher grabs 2 dry logs from the side and throws them onto the fire. He piles kindling high on top of them and blows steadily into the embers at the bottom. They glow and swell in size. No taking yet. He blows again for longer, and again. He feels his head starting to swim. A crackle, a lick of flame. It's taken. Panting, he turns back to the bundled-up coat on the floor with the child inside. Still no movement. A sickening knot tightens his stomach. What if she's... No, don't let yourself think that. Not yet. He reaches down and gently undoes the zipper on the parka. His trembling fingers push back the hood. She's pale, deathly pale. Her dark brown hair is wet and clings to her scalp. The tips are frozen. At a guess, she must only be 9 years old. Eyes closed, lips a sickening blue. But that's not the color that scares him the most. On her neck, there's red. Delicately as he can, the rancher takes the coat off her shoulders and hangs it up by the fire. She's dressed only in a plaid shirt, way too big for her. It looks like an adult's shirt, similar to an old one he used to have years ago. But on her neck, her hands, her feet, is that same deep red, layers of blood frozen to her skin. He sits back, his mind blank. He's seen that much blood before. Sure he has. When you work with cattle, it's an unfortunate part of the job. He's seen cows bleed out during childbirth. The girl in front of him, she's the same color as those orphaned calves that lie crying on the floor. A groaning sound fills the room. The rancher looks across at the armchair where his ma sits. She doesn't look at him, doesn't look at the girl on the floor. She just stares into the fire, same way she always does. Ma groans again, trying to express something she doesn't understand, being in a world without living in it. "Ma, it's okay. Sorry if I startled you. We have a guest with us." But she just keeps on groaning and staring into the fire. The rancher buries his head in his hands and lets out a deep breath. Only the sound of his breath is joined by another, a tiny breath rattling and rasping through a damaged child's throat, trying its best to keep its host alive. The rancher opens his eyes and stares at the child. She isn't conscious, not by a long shot, but she's breathing, a little at a time. The icicles in her hair have turned into rounded droplets of water that glow by the heat of the fire. He snaps back to his senses. He's not doing her much if she's just lying there soaking wet. He runs off upstairs and grabs some towels and a fresh flannel shirt to wear. After several minutes of drying her off, he's confident enough that he's got most of the water off. There's still a lot of blood caked to her skin, but as far as he can tell, there's no wound anywhere that it could have come from. Brow furrowed, he leaves her under a bundle of blankets and fills up the kettle with water. Hanging it carefully over the fire, he walks over to the cabinet and fishes out a tin of cocoa from the top shelf. Hasn't been used in years, but should still be fine. He would make it with milk, but she's probably dehydrated. Lifting the kettle's lid with the poker, the rancher pours the brown powder inside and waits for it to boil. The little girl's eyes are open now. She's staring into the flames. Her lips are looking a little more pink, her skin a little more blotchy. "You're safe here. Just stay by the fire and warm up a bit. You like cocoa?" The little girl drags her eyes away from the flames. Her expression is mostly blank. She looks too tired to be confused. "I don't know." "I think you will. Ma always gave me cocoa." "Okay." And with that, the farmhouse falls silent. The little girl stares into the fire. The rancher watches her, finally feeling the wave of exhaustion crashing over him. His ma has fallen asleep in her armchair. Only Maribel stays awake through the whole night, staying close to the little girl by the fire, occasionally licking her toes to try and warm them up. By the morning, the snow stopped, but the huge drifts remain. As the rancher walks across to the barn, he finds it hard to believe that just a few hours ago, the winds were whipping at his face as hard as they were. The world this morning is totally still. What the rancher finds even harder to believe is that there's a little girl in his house right now, fast asleep by the fire. He checked her forehead when he woke up this morning, and she miraculously hadn't caught a fever. She couldn't have been out in that weather for too long, but it only made the question more mysterious. Where did she come from? Maribel didn't get up this morning. From all of the excitement last night, she must have been too tired for today. Walking through the crisp morning air, he can't really blame her. He shoulders the barn door open. A column of steam curls out of the opening. All of that warmth, humidity, and cattle smell is strangely comforting this morning. But as the rancher goes around checking on all the cows inside, he very quickly discovers a problem. They're thin. Way too thin. Some of them look to be on the verge of starvation. He'd missed it last night as he drove them down in the dark, but in the warm glow of the barn's lights, it's unmistakable. These cows haven't been eating properly. He pours out several sacks of grain for them into the troughs, and they all gather around hungrily, filling both their stomachs as fast as they can. The rancher leans on the railing for a moment, confused. Even in this cold, there was still plenty of green grass for them up on the ridge. That's why he'd taken them up there. They should have had no trouble eating until the snow came in last night. He doesn't like this one bit. Last time Jorge had driven down and collected some of the meat, he'd had a few questions about the quantity being smaller than usual. Were the cows sick at all? Not that the rancher could tell. But now, looking at them, it's clear as day. Something's up. You hungry? The little girl nods. They sit across the table from one another, eating homemade bread and soup. Ma stays over by the fire. Maribel slowly wanders over to the kitchenette and flops down on the floor, exhausted. Where are you from? The girl shrugs her shoulders. You know how you got out here? Remember anything from last night? The little girl just eats her soup and shakes her head. She doesn't look particularly scared or worried, just a little confused. Where are your parents? Do you have parents? Again, the little girl shrugs. The rancher sits back and folds his arms. He's tried to call into town, but his phone line's gone out in the blizzard. Not much to be done until the snow clears. He's got a good relationship with the police around here. If he explains the situation, then it'll all be okay. What do you know? Can you remember anything from last night? It was dark. The girl slurps her soup. I was hungry. So hungry. Then I saw the light and I went towards that. My car? No. Well, yes, later on it was your car, but before it wasn't. What was the light then? Where were you? I don't know. It was just the light. Now he's even more confused, but try as he might, the rancher can't figure any of it out, and try as she might, the little girl can't remember anything more precise than that. The pair of them hop into the car and drive back out up the road that afternoon. The snow is piled so high that the rancher is having to get out twice as often as he did the previous night to clear a track for them. He isn't actually sure what he's brought her out here looking for. Clues, maybe? He almost laughs at himself at the thought, but that's probably the best word for it. If he can figure out how she got here, then he can work on understanding who she is and how to get her home. There's the damage to the phone line. One of the masts has collapsed, sagging heavily on the lines. That's not something he can fix on his own. No, sir. Looks like he'll have to wait for the snow to melt before making any phone calls again. That could be in 1 week. That could be in 3 months. He glances at the child sitting in the passenger seat. She's just staring out of the window in amazement, wrapped up in as many layers as he could put on her. They may be stuck together for a while. A lurch. The pickup plunges dangerously to the left. The rancher slams on the brakes and it comes to a stop just in time. A large chunk of snow in front of them comes loose and slips off the side of the road. It tumbles down into a gully that he hadn't even spotted. With all this snow on the ground, he has no frame of reference. Everything is just white. Stay here. The rancher opens the door and climbs out. He wishes Maribel was with him, but she'd wanted to stay home again. Poor dog. She must really be going through it if she wasn't even up for a ride in the pickup. Carefully as he can, testing every step before making it, the rancher creeps over to the edge of the gully. It's bigger than he thought, much bigger. It continues down, more and more sharply for a few hundred feet, all the way down into a... Oh no. There's a semi down there, a big rig, warped and bent, lying on the rocks. Just a glance is enough to tell the rancher it's Jorge's, but he just keeps staring at it in disbelief. Can't be. But it is. Stay in the car. The rancher reaches past the little girl and into the back seat. Grabbing a pair of crampons and some rope, he straightens up and looks at the girl. She knows it's serious. He can see the concern on her face. Stay in the car, he repeats. By the time the rancher makes it down to the truck, his legs and back are killing him. All this work over the last 24 hours is going to start taking its toll sooner or later, but some things have to be done. He pauses by the semi. It's on its side. He'll have to climb up onto it and try to open the door. Some things have to be done. He hoists himself up and manages to clamber onto the metal door. It's badly crumpled, and the window is smashed in. He doesn't fancy his chances of being able to get it open. One look through the window shows him that he won't want to do that anyway. Blood coats every inch of the inside of Jorge's truck. The cabin that the rancher is so used to seeing and sitting in is almost unrecognizable. Smashed glass is sprinkled across every surface with a dark brownish-red layer of gore frozen into everything else. There, in the midst of it all, still wearing a seatbelt, is Jorge's body. It dangles like a limp carcass at a butcher shop, like the cows he hangs in the slaughterhouse. And like those cows, a large chunk of Jorge is missing. His fat stomach is gone, not just cut open, but gone. The tops of his thighs, too, and much of his chest. So much of him is just missing. Open arteries and lifeless nerves dangle in place. That must have been a hell of a crash. The rancher reaches over and pulls Jorge's cap down over his eyes. Not much else to be done right now. No way he can clean this mess up by himself. But as the rancher climbs up the valley, his mind starts to connect some dots that leave a sick feeling in his stomach. He's seen that much blood somewhere else, or rather, on someone else, just last night. He slams the door to the pickup shut and starts to drive back down the track. Since the snow stopped, all of the drifts that he'd cleared earlier remain clear. It's only a few minutes' drive back down to the farm. He doesn't say a word the whole way, and neither does the little girl. She clearly senses something's up. The sick feeling in his stomach remains. He pulls up the handbrake, and the two of them sit in silence outside the farmhouse.
There's a truck in that valley. Did you know that?
Yes?
Is that where you came from last night?
I don't remember.
Was he... The rancher stops. Jorge didn't have any kids. What were you doing in his truck?
I don't know.
Was he...
The rancher can't bring himself to accuse his best friend of the words that almost left his mouth.
Do you think you might not remember because something bad happened to you?
I don't know. The rancher closes his eyes for a long moment. Silence fills the pickup.
Come on, let's get inside.
But inside wasn't the safe haven he'd been hoping for. Ma's been throwing up. Not just once, but a few times. She's distressed, groaning aimlessly for someone to come and save her. Maribel is pacing around the room, yelping and whining. The rancher immediately goes upstairs to get some rags to clean up with. Perfect timing, as usual. But he stops in his tracks when he comes back down. His ma's stopped moaning. The little girl is kneeling by the armchair, holding the old lady's hand. The room is calm. The little girl gently places the frail hand back on the armrest and comes over to take the rags from the rancher. Returning to the old lady, the girl goes about mopping her up as best she can. Maribel slumps back down on the floor. And that is how the four of them exist for the next few days. Ma gets sicker steadily, but the little girl stays by her side all day long, caring for her in every way. The rancher's glad of that. It gives him the time he needs to help his cows outside. None of them are in a good shape. Whatever it is, they're still getting thinner. He feeds them all the grain they'd normally need, and then some, and they always finish it off. Yet none of them are getting any fatter. The rancher leans on the railing, trusty dog by his side. His energy is starting to really lag behind what he needs. The last couple of days, even though he hasn't done all that much, have totally taken it out of him.
What do you think it is, Maribel?
He looks down at his little friend. She's looking thinner too, actually, but she's been eating just fine. It hits him. Tapeworms. As soon as the word comes into his head, it makes total sense. His cows, his entire herd by the looks of things, have been riddled with tapeworms. Oh, hell. He hasn't got anywhere near the amount of medicine needed to give some to all of them. Even if he did, a lot of them are looking pretty far gone. The chance of reinfection would be high. He needs supplies. He needs Jorge. Maribel whines softly next to him. He knows what they have to do. Laying Maribel down carefully by the fire, the rancher administers the tapeworm medicine. For a few hours, they lie there together. He strokes her side, waiting for her to pass it. The little girl watches over his shoulder. His ma sits back in her chair, mumbling to herself. He hasn't talked to the little girl anymore about Jorge yet. He isn't sure what there is to say. Maybe he should ask if Jorge was sick. After all, the cows clearly have had these tapeworms since before the other night. Jorge may have picked up contaminated meat from him last time he came. Maybe. Maribel passes the worm on the rug. Ugh, the smell. The rancher uses the tongs next to the fire to pick the worm up. It's long and pale, and dead. He tosses it into the fire and puts the tongs in the flames for a bit to sterilize them. The worm sizzles and pops in the flames. The sound makes his stomach crawl. The rancher glances around and sees the little girl staring at the tapeworm. He looks past the girl to his ma sitting in the chair. Her turn next. But as that night and the following morning reveal, it's too late. His ma's groans turn into cries of pain. She openly sobs by the fire, clutching at her stomach. Every time the rancher tries to give her the medicine, she just vomits it back up. Each time she vomits, there's more and more blood mixed in. The little girl gets more and more upset. It's not fair on her to have to witness something this traumatic and disgusting. There's nowhere else for her to go. She shouldn't even be here at all. The fact that she is means she has to help. That's all there is to it. By sunrise, his ma has passed away. There is nasty red bruising all across her abdomen, which tells him she must have bled out internally from this worm. He'd been too late to realize what was wrong. Too late with the cows, and too late with his ma. He covers his ma with a blanket and tells the little girl not to go and wash her hands. He needs to check on the cattle. Sure enough, during the night, a handful of them died too. The calves. They were the ones to go first whenever something like this happened. Mother cows stood over their calves, licking their heads, willing them to wake up. The rancher drags each body out to the back and burns them. He can't risk any more contamination. As the carcasses burn, he allows himself to cry. But when the rancher comes back into the house, it's full of noise, a noise that takes his brain a long time to comprehend. Crying, but not his own, not the little girl either. No, it was a new sound. It was a baby, a newborn child screaming at the top of its lungs. The rancher can't believe what he's looking at. The little girl is sitting at the hearth with Maribel at her feet. In her arms, drenched in blood, is a baby. The girl looks up at him and smiles sweetly.
It's a boy.
Then she turns around to his ma's body under the blanket. A sickening red patch soaks through the fabric, right over where her stomach would be. What the hell happened here?
I've got a little brother.
Securing and containing SCP-1003 has proven challenging. This is largely because the tapeworm that causes all of this damage is virtually indistinguishable from Echinococcus granulosus, the common variety of tapeworm that causes hydatid disease. The tapeworm, designated SCP-1003-1, follows the same life cycle as other regular worms. Its eggs come into contact with an animal through contaminated meat, saliva, or unclean surfaces and are ingested. Once inside the gut, they grow and latch onto the inside of the digestive tract, where they feed on the nutrients of the food traveling past them, steadily growing bigger and stronger. Once mature, they lay eggs, which pass out in the animal's excrement to continue the process. Infections spread quickly, particularly in unsanitary conditions amongst livestock, and can often be difficult to contain, as by the time the symptoms, nausea, weight loss, fever, start to manifest in the infected, the worms have likely already reproduced and have a new generation growing in the guts of other animals. As far as the Foundation is aware, SCP-1003 follows this normal pattern in all observed animals except humans. When a human ingests an egg from this tapeworm, a very different creature starts to grow in their gut. Human embryos, with the same genetic code as the tapeworm, begin to form. The rate of their growth is greatly accelerated, however. By just 8 weeks, they are as mature as the typical 3-week-old neonate or newborn child, although similar in size to an 8-week-old embryo at 13 to 16 centimeters. Many eggs usually enter this fertilization period, but almost all of them die before having a chance to develop much beyond the early stages. They stand the best chance of survival when buried in the hepatic tissue, where they can absorb plenty of nutrients from their host. The host at this point usually starts to experience mild symptoms, lethargy, the occasional stomach cramp, nothing particularly severe. Yet, the embryos that survive soon develop rows of temporary, razor-sharp teeth. At this point, passively absorbing nutrients is no longer enough for them. They bury their teeth into the soft tissue surrounding them and begin to eat. Once they enter this stage, their rate of growth increases exponentially the more flesh they consume. Eventually burrowing out into the world, the tapeworm child is born drenched in blood. The size and apparent age of the child that emerges from the corpse are determined by the size of the person they consume. For example, the child eating its way out of the rancher's maw appeared to be only a 10-month-old child, as there was very little of the frail old woman for it to eat. By contrast, the little girl who emerged from Jorge's gut had plenty of fat to feast on, and so was able to grow to the size of a 9-year-old. Once the child emerges, the teeth that they'd used to eat their way out quickly become loose and are replaced by regular human teeth. The children themselves have no memory at all of where they've come from or what they are. They have the same motor and linguistic skills that a regular child would possess at their age. Nothing, aside from their DNA, marks them out as being any different from the children around them, blissfully ignorant. just like the children around them. It is theorized that many of these children end up in orphanages. With no birth certificates or identifiable parents, they fall through the gaps in the system, quickly lost to the world. The only way to really track them at all is to follow the infections they cause. You see, these tapeworm children have one final curse they must live with. Their bodily fluids, their saliva, and sweat contain the same tapeworm protoscolex that will develop into SCP-1003-1 as soon as it is ingested by another creature, making the cycle start all over again. If you want to track down a tapeworm child, and I highly advise that you don't, all you have to do is follow the trail of nasty stomach infections, internal bleeding, and freak pregnancies amongst the outcasts of society. It, unfortunately, will not take long. There are currently 10 instances of SCP-1003-2 in containment. The children live in Bioresearch Area 13 under strict supervision. Researchers are only permitted to enter their cells whilst wearing full-body biohazard suits, but first must have Level 4 security clearance and must have written permission, and can only enter with specific research goals agreed upon. All staff are regularly tested for the presence of any kind of tapeworms in their system. No other animals are permitted in this facility.
A woman wakes up on a bright sunny morning in Midland, Texas. It's her day off, and she decides she's going to use the time to take care of all the lingering errands she'd been putting off for far too long. She gets dressed, washes her hair, and prepares to pour herself a nice bowl of cereal. But when she opens the refrigerator, she finds there's no milk. She'll need to see to that immediately. She steps out of her front door and notices a paper on her doormat. She bends down to pick up the pamphlet, which advertises a new supermarket opening in town. And what do you know? There's a coupon for milk attached. What a stroke of good luck. The woman makes her way into town, eager to check out the new grocery store. She parks her car and approaches the building, when suddenly a stranger is standing right in front of her, carrying a plate of what appear to be free samples. He's dressed like a supermarket employee, but he's built like a soldier, complete with a military crew cut. He smiles and tells her that he actually works for a rival store, and points at a building across the street. He's positive that whatever she thinks she can get at this store, she can instead get at the one across the street for a lower cost and higher quality. She can't help but notice the almost unsettling desperation in the salesman's face. Something about his spiel makes her feel like she's in danger. She politely declines his offer, but he continues pitching deals and bargains at her as she makes her way into the safety of the new supermarket. The clean tiles below and the buzzing fluorescent lights above seem so familiar, yet also strangely alien to her. Something about this place is just wrong. But she needs the milk, so she walks down the aisles, deeper into the store. She hears strange noises and looks over her shoulder. Was the bread aisle always behind her? She could have sworn she just came out of the meat and fish section. Where did they even keep the milk in this place? Every so often, there's a strange noise somewhere in the store around her. It sounds almost like footsteps, but not quite. More like claws tapping on the tiles. Is she alone in here? Come to think of it, she can't quite remember seeing anyone else since she came in. There's something so profoundly off about this place, but she just can't put her finger on what. She takes a step forward, and suddenly the floor gives way beneath her. The tiles separate with a whir of mechanized gears as a trapdoor opens up. In an instant, she's tumbling down into darkness. As she falls, she can see the white light beaming in from above illuminate the edge of something metal and razor sharp. In the store above, the sound of a scream can be heard, and a soft squish of metal-piercing flesh, followed by the gurgle of blood, and then the trapdoor closes. A tinny voice over the PA system comes on and says, "Clean up on aisle 6?" The woman is never seen again after that. What superficially appears to be an independent supermarket in Midland, Texas, actually contains a number of strange and often deadly paranormal secrets, and that doesn't even stop it from being a successful and popular supermarket. But the weirdest part of all? It's all perfectly legal, thank you very much. Welcome to Yeah, We're Totally Going to Sell You This, or as it's known to the SCP Foundation, SCP-4703. The primary anomalous effects surrounding SCP-4703 affect not its customers, but the very legality of its own existence and operations. The anomalies shift laws to make everything that goes on inside legal, no matter how unethical or dangerous. It also often reshapes laws to protect its own interests from outsiders, and anyone who breaks these laws may experience spontaneous attacks from violent animals, the most common of which are vicious lions. Here are a handful of the unethical and dangerous, yet perfectly legal, thank you very much, things that go on within the confines of SCP-4703.
The stacks of shelves are mounted on powerful pneumatic actuators that seem to shift and spin of their own accord. While this has the intention of keeping the store varied and stopping customers from leaving, it more often causes serious injury with its sudden movements. Occasionally, these sets of shelves will collide, crushing whatever is stuck between them. If a child becomes lost or separated from their parents while they're inside the store, the child is forcibly detained, and the parent or parents can only get their child back by either paying an upfront cost of $47.67 in cash, or submitting to have their eyebrows permanently removed with laser follicle surgery. There are also several dozen hidden trapdoor mechanisms beneath the floor in various parts of the building, each one triggered by some strange and arbitrary condition, such as saying the word Wednesday, or by not saying the word Wednesday. The triggers are updated each day and displayed on the store's website in several dead languages, including Latin, Koine Greek, Phoenician, and Punic. Each of these trapdoors drops into deep shafts filled with some kind of hazard, such as spikes, glitter, or poisonous snakes. Yes, that's poisonous, not venomous. The snakes are only dangerous when eaten, but victims have reported that they seem incredibly appealing, which makes resisting them rather difficult. A section on the far side of the store is marked Starving for Savings and Discounts ad Bestias, where all the products are fenced off and also marked down by 70% or more. However, the products are guarded by no less than 15 hungry lions. Store-branded fishing rods, telescopic grabbing mechanisms, and drones are available to rent for the explicit purpose of retrieving items remotely, although this will result in far higher costs, so you will have to brave the lions in order to attain those incredible deals. There's also a roughly 5% chance that after checkout, your cashier will ask you to kiss them on the lips. If you refuse, they'll burn your purchases in front of you, and you won't receive a refund. If you do kiss them, there's a 1 in 3 chance that the cashier will have an anomalous toxin on their lips that will cause you to drop dead instantly. And every day, at an arbitrary time between the hours of 3 p.m. and closing time, the lions will be released from the discount section to roam the store, and only 2 checkout lines will remain open. All items will be free during this period, but they must be scanned one by one. The SCP Foundation is currently exploring links between SCP-4703 and 2 other anomalies like SCP-2030 and SCP-1459, the former being the cursed hidden camera show Laugh is Fun, and the latter being a nightmarish vending machine that murders puppies and dispenses a variety of cookies in exchange. So then, if it is so dangerous, why doesn't the SCP Foundation simply block access to "yeah, we're totally going to sell you this"? Unfortunately, thanks to the anomalous legal effect created by SCP-4703, the Foundation can't just storm in or physically contain the building, so instead, they attempt to divert as many customers away from 4703 as possible. To do this, the Foundation has started a rival supermarket across the street, named Super Competitive Prices LLC. Sheldon M. Katz Esquire is an SCP Foundation lawyer and bureaucromancer, a thaumatologist skilled in the art of interfacing with anomalously bureaucratic SCPs, and he is spearheading the Foundation legal team's efforts into combating SCP-4703. Untangling the complex web of legality around SCP-4703 is a full-time job after all, and in the following memo, Mr. Katz did all he could to articulate the sheer enormity of the problem they're dealing with. He writes, "Counteraction of SCP-4703's legal anomalies is a top-level priority for our department, and we are making every effort to resolve the matter in a way which minimizes loss of life and economic detriment. We have received a significant number of inquiries regarding the mechanism of SCP-4703's indisputable legality. Unfortunately, there are no easy answers. Law is a human concept. It exists on paper because we write it down. It exists in practice because we enforce it. Generally, we interpret and exercise the law through the scrutiny of semantics, intent, and precedent. Yet, bureaucratic hazards such as SCP-4703 are not necessarily predicated on such things. In fact, the law as most know it has very little to do with the matter. While it's not a perfect comparison, one could say that baseline law is to anomalous law as arithmetic is to algebra. Both are recognized as mathematics, but the latter is more abstract. Imagine that Timmy and Sally each have 2 apples. If Timmy gives Sally his apples, then Sally should end up with 4. But she doesn't. She has 10. How can this be? Sally recounts the apples and reenacts the scenario over and over, but there is no mistake. 2 and 2 make 10. It is an incontrovertible fact. You see, even if anomalies are irrational, they are factual, and it is essential that one accepts this if they wish to develop a countervailing methodology. Once Sally accepts that her 4 apples have become 10, She reevaluates her radix and decides to recount the apples in base 4. Suddenly, the 10 apples are 10 apples. 10 is 4 in base 4, which is the appropriate number of apples. Eureka! Sally collects another 4 apples, bringing the total to 20, which is 20, which is 8, which confirms that her new paradigm aligns with the abnormality. Form follows function according to the function of the form, and at last, everything makes sense. Except none of it does, really. A well-behaved reality oughtn't conflate the concrete with the abstract. If you initially perceived a countable sum of 10 apples in base 10, then the equivalent number of apples in base 4 should be 22, since it stands to reason that changing your subjective view of an outcome oughtn't alter the physical materials in the equation. However, we live in a very naughty reality which may, on a whim, allow a young girl to wield apples unbeholden to thermodynamics. This explanation is inadequate, of course, but hopefully it goes a small way toward helping you understand why the legal department is currently occupied with a comprehensive redrafting of Texas corporate law in a quaternary semiological system. This in itself would be an exceptional feat even for the most skilled of bureaucromancers, and it is further compounded by the necessary incorporation of contingency clauses against the self-aware fact patterns that keep legitimizing rabid lions into existence inside my goddamn bathroom. We are grateful to you, our valued colleagues, for your patience and cooperation as we work together toward a solution. The Foundation is currently conducting a 3-pronged attack against the forces of SCP-4703, the first being the Super Competitive Prices LLC competitive store. The second is the tireless efforts of Mr. Katz and his team against the trifling legal issues of SCP-4703, and the third is outright infiltration and espionage. Of course, when you're going behind enemy lines, it's crucial that the proper operative is selected for the job. It can't just be anyone dropped into a high-pressure situation like this, especially considering the rapidly evolving nature of SCP-4703's conditions. The SCP Foundation was more than aware that they might only get one shot at getting one of their own in and out of the building. For this task, they selected Field Agent Felicity Blandina, codename Karen of Justice. Blandina was uniquely qualified for a job like this. In personality tests conducted on all Foundation agents to test loyalty, they consistently found Blandina to be one of the most obtuse and shameless agents on the Foundation payroll. During group lunches with other staff members, she has been reported numerous times sending meals back to the kitchen when she felt they were unsatisfactory. And Foundation cyber analysts have detected multiple posts on various social media networks made by her, directly tagging and criticizing brands that provided products or services she perceived as being subpar. While these qualities made her a terror to the customer service staff in her local area, they made her the ideal candidate for bypassing the bureaucratic stronghold of SCP-4703. If anyone could do it, it would be Field Agent Felicity Blandina. She was sent into the building with an expired coupon under the pretense of being an unhappy customer. She spoke to a sales assistant inside the store named Daniel Paulson, who explained to her that her coupon was denied because it was only applicable when the recipient submitted to ritual castration performed by the SCP-4703 staff. Seeing as Agent Blandina didn't have the necessary equipment to undergo such a procedure, Paulson generously offered to provide her with a free surgery to have the proper parts attached, though finding a suitable donor would likely take several months. Agent Blandina, following her well-trained Foundation directives, could not be assuaged by the bargain. Instead, she pressed on, first guilt-tripping him with sob stories about her children, then her lifelong struggles with astigmatism, and even threatening Paulson with physical violence. Eventually, she delivered the true coup de grace, demanding to speak to the manager. Showing clear reluctance, Paulson agreed and led Agent Blandina to a door near the front of the store. It opened up into an unlit staircase that descended into the darkness below. At the bottom, they found a break room that appeared similar to a bunkhouse in a prisoner of war camp, containing hammock after hammock filled with uncomfortable sleeping employees. Paulson informed Agent Blandina that some of the people who work at the store were once normal civilians who'd been exploited with a number of legal loopholes, and now lived inside the store full-time. Some, for example, had stayed in past closing time, which had resulted in them becoming store property for a minimum of a year. Paulson himself had entered a raffle for an abs transplant, and instead won servitude at SCP-4703, which he couldn't legally turn down thanks to the powerful anomalous laws of the store. As Paulson and Agent Blandina ventured deeper into the bowels of the staff area, they passed 11 unmarked doors, before finally stopping in front of the 12th and last one. She opened the door and discovered shelves and stacked boxes within. Agent Blandina expressed incredulity at the idea that the store's manager would be kept inside of a supply closet in the basement, but Paulson insisted that this was indeed the manager's office, and as he did, he pulled a string connected to the ceiling. This caused a wall of boxes to split down the middle like a secret doorway, revealing a large executive chair facing the wall on the other side of the room. Still maintaining the cover story that she just wanted a discount, Agent Blandina pressed on and approached the chair. She spun it around to get a better look at the manager and found herself standing in front of a desiccated corpse with no eyes and all of his teeth pulled out, his mouth wrenched open in a permanent, silent scream of terror. Paulson identified this man as Mr. Venatio Haruspice, the manager of SCP-4703. Paulson would have told Agent Blandina that his boss was a corpse earlier, but to do so was against the rules. Agent Blandina sighed and grumbled, "I feel like I should have expected this." Paulson assured Agent Blandina that she could still make her complaint, though, and the owner of the store would eventually hear it. As Paulson understood it, the body known as the manager acted almost like a kind of telephone, sending messages through to the owner. The owner would then reply through faxed messages hidden inside the cereal boxes that acted as the only food source of the staff trapped within. This Kafka-esque nightmare just kept getting worse and worse, but Agent Blandina refused to give up that easily. Agent Blandina asked him to explain the exact nature of the manager's condition to her. Paulson replied, "I know that he's legally our manager. I know that he's, well, what he is. I know that one of us always has to kiss him goodnight at closing time. I know that if we tell him something, the owner knows, but the owner seems to know everything that happens here anyway, so I can't be certain that's related. What else? I know that he's empty, or hollow, actually, hollow's probably a better word." Agent Blandina leaned in a little further to see what exactly Paulson meant by that, only to make a horrifying discovery. The manager wasn't a whole corpse, he was just desiccated skin, a husk somehow propped up into the shape of a corpse. When Agent Blandina asked why Paulson specified hollow and not empty, he told her that it was because a noise was sometimes heard emanating from within the skin husk. Agent Blandina wisely refused to put her ear anywhere near the manager's gaping, toothless mouth, and instead fed the hidden microphone she had been wearing down into the husk's throat. Before Paulson had time to remark on the strangeness of this, sirens and alarms began going off all around them. Paulson began to panic, yelling that the lions were incoming, and the duo needed to move quickly to get out of harm's way. Luckily, Agent Blandina was able to escape with only minor injuries, but shortly after her escape, SCP-4703's legality was once again restructured to make it illegal for non-employees to enter the employee-only areas. The audio that Agent Blandina recorded inside the body of the manager was also analyzed by experts at the Foundation, and they discovered that, when sped up by 75%, the sound was indistinguishable from human laughter. Due to the highly strange nature of this anomaly and its containment procedures, even by SCP Foundation standards, the classes and designations applied to SCP-4703 are equally strange and complex. Knowledge of the file and the anomaly itself is relatively low tier, with restricted Level 2 access permissions. Due to the immense difficulty in keeping SCP-4703 hidden or contained, thanks to its unique legal situation, it has been given the Object Class Keter. This, however, is where things get even stranger. The SCP-4703 store has a rare secondary object class, Truculent. This classification is likely to be unfamiliar to most, but it is used in the specific situation when an item is unpredictable and often transformative, and the containment measures around it must be consistently updated and evolved in order to meet its containment needs. It has the Level 3 or Kenic disruption class, meaning that it has a roughly medium potential to cause disruption, though this disruption is likely to be confined to a relatively local area. And finally, it has the Risk class Warning, meaning that it presents a high risk to all who interact with it, complete with the possibility of causing severe harm, including death. Though legally, due to a missive sent from the law firm working in association with SCP-4703, I am obliged to tell you that it's mainly because the bargains at "yeah, we're totally going to sell you this" are simply to die for, which is perfectly legal, thank you very much.
Its leathery wings spread out, tattooed in arcane symbols of cultures long wiped out. Its clawed feet pad the linoleum, each step leaving a black scorch mark that stinks of brimstone. Steaming drool drips from the creature's burning tusks, nestled in concentric circles beneath its glowing, blood-red eyes. Its terrible gaze has already locked onto its prey, its quarry, and nothing will possibly deter it from getting what it wants. Fair trade organic bananas, 25% off.
What a steal.
The college student awakens in his trash dorm after another night of debauchery. His head is swimming. His tongue feels like sandpaper. The room is littered with empty cans, solo cups, and bottles, and his roommate is still out cold next to him, having had his face graffitied by some jokester with a black marker. But the college student isn't thinking about the night before, not that he could remember any of it anyway. He's thinking about his rumbling stomach. He needs to get some food and a drink in him or else he's going to feel terrible all day. He knows exactly what he needs: a bacon omelet and a tall, cool glass of OJ, the breakfast of champions. There's only one problem. When the college student checks the communal fridge, he sees that there is no orange juice and no eggs. That's when a flood of memories washes over him, less like a cool, refreshing sea breeze and more like being waterboarded. The previous night, he and his idiot friends had made that delicious, life-saving orange juice disappear into a series of screwdrivers, and in their altered state, they'd thrown all the eggs at each other.
Man, he thinks, this is embarrassing. I've really got to get my act together.
But before he can get any sweeping life changes put in place, he still needs to solve the breakfast conundrum: bacon omelet and a tall glass of OJ or bust. He throws on a light jacket, puts on his shoes, makes sure his roommate is lying on his side just to be safe, and heads out into town. That's where he'll find the means to make his breakfast dreams a reality. On his omelet odyssey, the college student passes a few of the local boutique cafes. They probably have what he needs, but on a student's budget, especially considering the money he probably blew on the previous night's rager. He thinks it's more economical to just buy the ingredients and make the breakfast himself. His mom and dad had always told him that college was about building life skills, after all. But that's when a second problem presents itself. For some reason, every grocery store or supermarket he passes seems to be closed. What gives? Is it some kind of national holiday that had somehow slipped his mind? As his hungover head pounds like someone installed a tiny construction worker with a pneumatic drill inside his brain, the hopelessness of this whole situation is beginning to dawn on him. Is he doomed to an omelet-free hell of his own making, just for the crime of wanting to have fun on a Saturday night? Life can be so cruel sometimes. But in the college student's lowest moment, a glimmer of hope presents itself. It seems he's absent-mindedly wandered off the beaten track, far closer to the edge of town than he'd intended to go. And while he's there, he spots what could be his salvation. But before we go any further, I have a question for you. Does something feel wrong with you? Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, and this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description. It's betterhelp.com/DrBob. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp, so you can connect with a therapist and see if it helps you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which is a common thing with therapy, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/DrBob. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. And now, back to our hungover college student. It looks like a store, an honest-to-goodness supermarket, with the sign above the entrance reading, Babylon's. With a newly formed spring in his step, the college student makes a beeline. He can taste that hearty omelet and dose of vitamin C already. Once inside, the college student wastes no time looking for his eggs and OJ. Nothing about the store seems particularly strange until he ends up face-to-face with one of the people working there. Typically, he's used to seeing people his age or even younger working as store assistants. The man he's staring at has got to be in his mid-40s, and despite his somewhat dweeby uniform, he's one of the most intimidating people the college student has ever seen. His large, muscular arms bulge out of the baby blue uniform shirt, covered in what looks like intimidating gang tats. The man's head is completely shaved, with a long scar underneath one eye and a series of teardrop tattoos under the other. The college student can't help but think, holy hell, have they started hiring death row inmates here? Strangely, this incredibly scary man looks more nervous to see the college student in here. Like having a customer in the store was a scenario they somehow hadn't covered in the employee training manual. The college student politely insists that he won't need any help. He's just here for eggs and a carton of orange juice. As he walks further into the store, the college student can't help but realize that the strange man isn't an outlier. Anytime he sees an employee of the store, they're a large, beefy man covered in tattoos who looks like he should be doing 25 to life in San Quentin. He's wondering if maybe the store is getting a tax break for hiring ex-cons when he sees something strange down the aisle in front of him, loitering in the refrigerated section. It's mist, but not the kind of dispersed mist you see out in the world. It's more like a solid column of mist. If the college student didn't know any better, he might have even thought that the column of mist was oddly humanoid. But he blinks and the mist is gone. So maybe it was just some strange product of his hungover imagination. He thinks, man, I hope I didn't party so hard I gave myself brain damage. He continues his egg quest, undeterred by the strangeness that he's seen so far. But another problem seems to be presenting itself. All of the products here are a little strange and unfamiliar. Without even trying, he's somehow found himself in the candy section, and despite having a youthful sweet tooth, he doesn't recognize any of the brands around him. One that catches his eye is a ghost-shaped candy labeled Candied Souls, which he thinks to be a strangely morbid name. He gives the candy a light squish to see if it's gummy or a hard candy, but when he does, it lets out an almost imperceptible, ghostly wail. The noise is still enough to shock the college student into dropping it. The candied soul falls to the ground, where it bounces once and then comes to rest. He looks up to the section on the shelf he picked it up from, and to his astonishment, a new one appears to replace the other one, right before his eyes. It just materializes out of thin air. Impossible. Before the college student's mind can even process all the implications of the thing he's just seen, he turns to see an immense being entering the aisle next to him, shaking the ground with each footstep. It's easily 7 or 8 feet tall, with leathery, dragon-like skin and long, twisted horns emerging out of its skull. The monster lumbers, its tail whipping with excitement, its fangs borne. The monster speaks in a deep, rumbling voice like a volcano preparing to erupt.
Oh, they've got a special on Candied Souls. It's my lucky day.
Without a moment's hesitation, the college student screams and runs in the opposite direction. There's a monster in the store, a demon, something straight out of hell. And even though the demon doesn't seem to be behaving aggressively, in fact, it's downright confused as to why the college student decided to scream and run, the college student is racked with mortal fear. Screw the orange juice, screw the omelet, he needs to get out of here before he's turned into breakfast. In fear's grasp, he isn't thinking logically. He's just running around the store in incoherent terror, trying not to be caught by beings that aren't even chasing him. Strangely, he does notice out of the corner of his eye that the staff aren't freaking out. They're acting like the freakish creature in the store is perfectly normal, just another run-of-the-mill customer. This place is clearly completely insane. On the way to the exit, the college student finds himself frozen at the front windows, staring out at the madness occurring in the parking lot. A series of cars have pulled up on the asphalt as the doors of the cars open, and a menagerie of nightmarish impossibilities pour out. Gooey insectoid beasts with a horrifying number of legs. Long, coiling snake-like entities covered in thorns. Beasts made entirely of blood-colored slime. Winged horrors covered in eyes. So many things beyond description. The college student's mind can barely process what he's seeing. While he's got hell amassing in front of him, the college student has no idea that heaven is getting closer and closer behind. He feels a strange warmth, unlike anything he's ever experienced, spreading across his back. A voice that seems to speak straight to his soul says, "Excuse me." When the college student sees the creature standing behind him, his eyes begin to water in pure reverence. It's a being torn out of the most ancient scriptures, almost impossible for the brain to comprehend. A series of spinning golden rings, covered in eyes of every color, wreathed in fire, and topped by a number of floating crowns. Behind it, 6 wings as pure and white as untouched snow, beat magnificently. Any thought of eggs or orange juice is wiped from the college student's mind by the mere sight of it before him.
Be not afraid,
The angelic creature says.
I was just wondering if you knew where I can find some toilet paper in here.
The college student isn't interested in telling the impossible creature where it can find the toilet paper. He just wants to get out of this store. He just wants to survive. If he gets out of here alive, he swears he'll never party again. In a moment of lucidity, he sees the exit and runs for it, knowing this might be his only chance to survive the morning. He runs, trying to purge the angelic splendor from his eyes. When his feet hit the blacktop outside, he knows he's got a chance, even if the parking lot is full of demons and heavenly beings. But he doesn't expect to see a number of black tactical vehicles screech into the parking lot as men in suits and sunglasses pour out of the vehicles. They don't seem like they're here to help. They seem like they're here to get him. The college student does his best to frantically explain himself. Wait, please, I just wanted some eggs and OJ. I just wanted some eggs and OJ. But his protests are cut off when one of the men gets him in a headlock and forces a rag covered in chloroform over his face. Darkness falls. When the college student wakes up, he's in his dorm room again, surrounded by the same trash and the same graffitied sleeping roommate. He has no memories of the events that transpired before. All he knows is that he's hungry and thirsty. He drags himself up off the ground, head pounding, and schleps his way over to the fridge. An omelet and a glass of orange juice sound good right about now. And lucky for him, when he opens his fridge, a carton of eggs and a carton of orange juice are both waiting for him, though he's not sure why he bought the OJ with pulp. This is hardly a normal retail experience, unless you find yourself shopping at SCP-913, also codenamed the Little Shop Mart of Horrors, though it's best known to its customers as Babylons. To the untrained eye, it appears to be an abandoned supermarket located 3 kilometers from Foundation Containment Site 118, but to those with the proper clearances, it's known to be a bizarre menagerie of anomalous phenomena. During the Anomalous supermarket's business hours, cars will appear in the parking lot, delivering instances of the entities known as SCP-2854-1. These entities can manifest in a variety of forms, some of which we still haven't received full documentation on, but here are some of the primary documented forms. First, the incorporeal forms. One of them is a form with visible eyes wrapped in long lengths of intangible chains. The others are mist-like creatures with no discernible facial features. The corporeal beings are considerably more intimidating to look at. These include angelic entities, in the biblically accurate sense, with many wings and eyes, and their counterparts, large entities that appear consistent with the multiplicity of demons described in Christian mythology. In terms of general layout, Babylon's is not dissimilar to your typical small independent supermarket. There are checkout lanes, a stock room, and multiple aisles of products. I imagine you're probably wondering what kind of products they sell at Babylon's, and lucky for you, we have some declassified files on that too. One available confectionery product is a candy labeled Candied Souls, a gummy shaped like a cartoon ghost, packaged in pink wrapping paper. They also sell eggs holding tridents, producing flame from an unknown source in an airtight red container adorned with pentagrams. They're labeled deviled eggs. For those with more carnivorous tastes, there are hot dogs with 3 separate cylindrical-shaped heads that each bark independently of each other, wrapped in a plastic container labeled Demon Dogs. And of course, there is green-colored bread in the shape of humanoid entities undergoing an advanced state of decomposition, wrapped in a plastic container labeled Unbread. Very cute, I'm sure you'll agree. When the products are removed from the shelves, they will regenerate automatically, with the speed of their regeneration depending on the level of demand for the product in the store. The longest interval for regeneration is 30 minutes. The shortest is 1 second. Where the products come from is still a mystery. The currency that the SCP-2854-1 entities pay for the products with is also unidentified. It's paper currency written in an unknown script with a picture of a gnome on it. Once the products have been purchased, the entities will return to their card and demanifest. A perfectly reasonable transaction, in a manner of speaking. The Foundation was doing an admirable job keeping this anomaly contained, but like many small businesses, Babylon soon found its clientele being poached by the local Walmart. This was the cause of the currently most conspicuous containment breach, Incident 2854-A. 2 instances of SCP-2854-1, which the Foundation has since learned were named Gregory and Alma, manifested outside the Anomalous store, only to find that it was closed and devoid of personnel. The 2 impossible entities returned to their car and disappeared before appearing at a Walmart in Wilmington, North Carolina, for some late-night shopping. As Gregory and Alma entered the store, audio and video were recorded by the in-store CCTV cameras, and an immediate look of terror was plastered across the faces of everyone in their proximity. Gregory walked forward, trying to get a sense of the store's layout while scratching his head with long claws. He murmured out in a deep, demonic voice,
This sucks. Babylon's was closed, and now we're forced to go to a different supermarket. I hope that we don't have to do this on a daily basis.
Alma, who trailed not far behind him, said,
Well, maybe we'll get lucky, and Babylon's will be open later. We can always go back to check. You don't have to go here if you don't want to.
Gregory grumbled.
Nah, we already walked in the door. We have a commitment to shop here now. Hey, there's an employee. Maybe he can help us.
The employee was turned in the opposite direction, doing a listless stocktake on a ratty old clipboard as the 2 entities approached. Gregory politely asked where they could find the organic produce section. They were from out of town and had never visited a Walmart. Just as the employee was mindlessly droning out that the organic produce could be found on aisle 4, he turned and saw who, or what, he was actually talking to. His eyes teared up despite himself. His legs began to tremble. It was impossible. He had to be seeing things, but he wasn't. He clenched his jaw and braced for death, but instead, he got a jolt of energy. He turned and ran, screaming that there were monsters in the store. Gregory and Alma gave chase, still confused about where to find the organic produce they'd come in looking for. As they called for the employee to slow down, he just screamed louder and made a beeline for the exit, followed by a stampede of panicked customers. Gregory grimaced, confused, and muttered,
Well, crap. The customer service here is terrible.
Guess whose idea it was to shop here, Gregory?
quipped Alma.
Oh, shut up, Alma. We'll find it on our own.
As Alma and Gregory split up to explore the store, hoping the organic produce revealed itself, a night guard frantically called the police, ranting and raving about actual monsters having invaded the store. This was only going to make the chaos worse, as 3 different groups were alerted by the call: the local Wilmington Police, the SCP Foundation, and the Unusual Incidents Unit. For those not aware, the Unusual Incidents Unit is one of the more obscure and ineffectual groups of interest that the SCP Foundation occasionally both collaborates and clashes with. They're the anomalous department of the FBI, investigating cases of an unusual nature. They're highly understaffed, underfunded, and under-equipped compared to the SCP Foundation, and even the Global Occult Coalition. Most of the time, they inconvenience the Foundation by getting under their feet during important investigations. This was yet another one of these instances. Soon enough, a blockade of UIU agents and standard, non-anomalous police were marshaled around the Walmart, yelling over a loudspeaker for Gregory and Alma to come out and surrender. Naturally, this made them start bickering again.
Guess our shopping trip attracted more attention than we thought.
What was your first clue? The panicking customers? Maybe the cashier that thought we were psychos? Wow, how could you possibly figure that out, Gregory? You must be a genius or something.
Oh, just shut up, Alma. That attitude of yours is getting on my last goddamn nerve. Let's just go, okay? They're not going to let us leave peacefully anyway.
Gregory and Alma exited Walmart, at which point they were mobbed and apprehended by the UIU agents, at which point the SCP Foundation arrived to take over the situation. They contained Gregory and Alma harmlessly in Type 3 spectral mutagen allocators. Everyone in attendance was amnesticized and then released, all no thanks to the UIU. Since Incident 2854-A was documented, the Foundation has classified SCP-2854 as Euclid and modified its containment procedures accordingly. The Foundation purchased the land on which the seemingly abandoned store is located and erected a 2-meter tall chain-link fence around the perimeter. The store is staffed by a rotating collection of D-Class and undercover Foundation agents, who are to remain up to date on the placement of products within the store so as to better assist the SCP-2854-1 instances. Satisfied customers are less likely to shop elsewhere, after all. The embedded personnel take an active role in the containment of SCP-2854-1 instances within a 5-mile radius of SCP-2854. Anyone who requests a transfer will be given a complimentary course of Class A amnestics to ensure that they won't carry any of the memories to their next assignment. I imagine most people working in retail wish that their employers had similar procedures. As a regular patron of my own local corner store, I can confirm that trying to find reasonable prices these days is its own special circle in the Inferno. But as long as we don't find ourselves wandering the Isles of Babylons, then perhaps we could all be doing a lot worse.
The D-Class runs through the halls of an empty grocery store with nothing but darkness around him. He turns corner after corner, searching for a door, but there are only endless aisles and stretches of blank walls. Nowhere to go, nowhere to run. Behind him, he can hear a soft, wet, gurgling sound. He turns, eyes wide in horror, and something pulls him down into the floor below, swallowing his screams. The day is drawing to a close, the sun dipping over the horizon as families across the small town wash up after dinner, placing their dirty dishes in the sink and starting to wind down for the evening. For those rare few with office jobs in this town, the workday stopped at 5 p.m., and now there's nothing but rest ahead of them until the day begins fresh again in the morning. But for the employees working the graveyard shift at the local, woefully understaffed grocery store, the day is far from over. There's closing time at 10 p.m., then cleaning, locking up for the night, and eventually, mercifully, clocking out. One of the workers, a young woman, watches the clock through heavy eyes, threatening to close. She shouldn't have picked up this extra shift. Working a double was overly ambitious today, and she can feel exhaustion creeping up on her, threatening to drag her down into an inadvisable on-the-clock slumber. It's almost 8 o'clock, only a few more hours to go. She can make it. Ordinarily, she'd try to make small talk with her coworkers, but several of them called in sick today. It's just her and one cashier, who's been on break for way longer than the allotted 15 minutes. So really, it's just her. She busies herself, shelving jars of peanut butter, watching the seconds tick by. More of the workday gone. More of her so-called summer vacation gone. But every hour worked is more money in the bank. More in the travel fund that will take her out of this town and towards something that might actually make her happy. She just has to save up enough, has to face these monotonous days and the same repeating carousel of faces a little bit longer. Then, it'll all be worth it. She tries not to think about the fact that her older co-workers have said the same thing about themselves, the ones who have worked here for 10 years. They all thought they'd be out of here in a year too, but they aren't. They're still bagging groceries for their neighbors and former classmates, watching the seconds tick by on that grimy old clock. As she reaches down for another jar, someone suddenly speaks just behind her. They ask if they can help her find anything. She spins around, startled, the jar slipping from her grasp and landing on the ground with a crash, glass and peanut butter sprayed across the floor. There's no one there. She must be imagining things, she thinks. But when she turns her back, she hears it again. She spins around, quicker this time, hoping to catch them in the act. There's something so familiar about that voice. Did another coworker come in after all? No, it's not one of her coworkers. Suddenly, as she hears the voice speak again, asking if she wants a paper or plastic bag, her stomach drops. She knows now. The voice is her own. That's it. She's officially too exhausted to keep working right now. There aren't any customers in the store, so she's going to head to the break room and try and get her head together. As she starts the walk there, she suddenly realizes that she can't find the door. The door to the break room is there, but where's the exit? The door she comes through every single day before clocking in. The doors that she practically sprints toward when her shifts close out. The ones that lead to freedom and home and the chance to remember herself as a person and not just an endless stretch of meaningless tasks. Somehow, the door is gone. No, that can't be possible. Doors don't just vanish. She's gotten turned around. She's misplaced it. She paces through the store, determined to find the door, but she can't. It truly seems to have vanished. Sweat begins to bead on her forehead, her hands trembling as she retraces her steps over and over again. It isn't an especially big store. She can't be lost. No, it's just her worst nightmare coming true. She can never go home, can never clock out. She's going to be at work for all eternity. Her mouth dries up. She has trouble swallowing, trouble catching her breath as her breathing becomes shallower, tinged with panic. It's an impossible situation, but she just knows that this is it, that she'll never get to go home again. At the same time, she's never wanted anything more in the world than to get out of here as soon as possible. If she doesn't, she could die in here. And she swore to herself that she would never ever die in this town. As she navigates the aisles, she can hear faint whispering, like people huddled together just out of sight, talking about her in tones just too hushed to make out. A few aisles over, she hears a sudden, piercing scream. Is there someone else trapped in here with her? She follows the sound to aisle 3, but when she peers down the aisle, there's no one there. At least, at first, there's no one there, until she looks down at the floor. There, on the yellowing tiles, a pale, translucent hand is poking up from the floor. The tile around it shimmers and ripples like still water disturbed by a pebble. The hand reaches up, further and further, stretching toward her. It wants her to reach out and grasp it, but the thought turns her stomach. That hand can't belong to anything human. So instead, she turns and runs in the opposite direction, stopping when she can hear the blood rushing in her ears and taste metal on the back of her tongue. As the sound of her pulse fades, her heart slowing, she hears another sound that causes it to spike all over again. A long, slow, dragging sound, like someone pulling something heavy across the floor. It thumps, then drags some more. There's a sound with it, too. A wet, strained sound, like a combination of water bubbling up from a drain and someone struggling to breathe. Every fiber of her being is screaming at her to run, to get out of there right now, but she can't move her feet. The sound draws closer and closer and closer, until everything suddenly goes black. If there were anyone passing by the grocery store at the moment, they would hear a scream cut short with a wet gurgle. The next morning, the manager finds her body still lying there in the same aisle. The store closes a few weeks later, never to open again. SCP-3182 is a derelict grocery store in the town of Denton, Missouri that hosts a number of anomalous phenomena during the hour between 7:52 and 8:52 p.m. each day. This window of time is referred to as a Deimos event. Deimos events first began occurring following the store's closure, which is attributed to a combination of an economic downturn and the tragic death of a 17-year-old part-time worker. When a Deimos event occurs, all outside sources of visible light are rendered unable to penetrate the store's interior. Individuals inside during the event will insist that all exits and entrances have disappeared, preventing anyone from leaving or entering. It should be noted that video recordings of SCP-3182 during Deimos events show that the doors do not in fact go anywhere, indicating that SCP-3182 impacts the perceptions and mental states of those affected by it, rather than the environment itself. Some of these aforementioned anomalous effects include a sudden, overwhelming but inexplicable sense of distress or sadness, a sense of severe resentment toward the town of Denton, Missouri, the sudden recollection of memories belonging to former customers of SCP-3182, a sense of approaching danger, and the urge to do something to prevent or escape it, and an extreme desire to leave the area even though it is impossible to do so. These effects primarily occur in the vicinity of aisle 3 of the store. In addition to the emotional and psychological phenomena, there have also been reports of disembodied moaning and screaming, the appearance of humanoid apparitions, and the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. In order to obtain a more in-depth understanding of SCP-3182 and its Deimos events, researcher Dr. Gradian supervised a series of on-site tests. D-Class 132449 was selected for the first test, during which he was placed within the former break room of SCP-3182 and instructed to remain there for the full duration of the Deimos event. He was equipped with a camera and earpiece to allow for two-way communication between him and Dr. Gradian. At first, D-132449's attitude was casual, even cheerful, as he expressed relief at having nothing to do but sit in a chair for an hour. But after 7 minutes and 32 seconds passed, he began to feel quite differently. The D-Class became anxious, stating, "I've got to get home soon.
before correcting himself to say that he would go back to his cell after the test concluded. 22 minutes and 19 seconds passed, and D132449 became increasingly uneasy, asking Dr. Gradian if he could hear a strange sound. The noise was not detected on the video feed, but D132449 insisted that he could hear something, and traced the sound to the broken microwave on a nearby table. In this close proximity, the video feed picked up the sound, a soft gurgling from within the closed microwave. Dr. Gradian recommended that the D-Class not interact with the microwave and that he return to his seat. The man refused, insisting that he had to know what was going on with the microwave. The gurgling sound grew louder and more intense, and Dr. Gradian insisted more strongly that the D-Class not open the microwave. But the man did not listen. He opened the microwave, and the video feed cut to black. The remains of D132449 were later located throughout the plumbing system of SCP-3182. An inspection of the break room microwave found a viscous black liquid inside, which was extracted and taken to a nearby Foundation site. Analysis of the liquid's makeup concluded that it was genetically identical to several hundred past and current residents of the town of Denton, Missouri. During the next test, D342089 was instructed to examine Aisle 3 during a Deimos event. First, however, he began in the break room. Before beginning the test, Dr. Gradian gave a strong recommendation that the man avoid pursuing the source of any gurgling sounds he might hear. D342089 asked why, but Dr. Gradian dodged the question, instead asking the D-Class to move toward Aisle 3. Halfway there, he paused, spotting the words, "Get out of here right now," scratched into the wall over the main entrance. The D-Class remarked that this would be impossible given the lack of doors in SCP-3182. He would not respond to any reminders from Dr. Gradian that there were, in fact, doors in the building, particularly the very entrance door he had walked through to get inside. As D342089 advanced further into the eerie, darkened store, almost at the infamous Aisle 3, Dr. Gradian checked in regarding his mental state. Aside from the atmosphere, which he deemed pretty damn spooky, D342089 did not report any adverse mental effects. Before he could elaborate any further on how he was feeling, however, he quickly discovered that he was not alone in the store. A figure, a female humanoid in shape, stood at the other side of Aisle 3. She wore a simple shirt and flared jeans, and if one glanced at her quickly, she might pass for an ordinary girl, but she wasn't. As the D-Class stared at her, he could see her face shifting from ordinary human features to a warped imitation of a face, eyes, nose, and mouth moving out of place and drifting into abnormal configurations. As she raised a hand, he could see that it was a formless, fingerless blob. This was too much for D342089. The panicked man fumbled around on the shelf next to him, searching for a makeshift weapon. He grabbed a cardboard box and prepared to throw it at the apparition. In response, she shook her head rapidly, warped features frozen in a look of terror. She opened her mouth, and the sound of hundreds of opening cash registers came out. She shook her head even harder, trying to communicate something vital to the D-Class. He refused to listen to the apparition or to Dr. Gradian, who warned him not to do anything rash. But he did do something rash. He threw the box at the entity with all his might, and as it made contact, he could hear a soft gurgling sound just behind him. Then, just as it did before, the video cut out. After the Deimos event concluded, D342089 was found alive in a dumpster outside SCP-3182. He was, however, missing something: his skin. An investigation of the interior found that the message he had seen written on the wall had completely vanished following the event. During the third test, D693221 was placed in Aisle 3 and directed to remain there for the duration of the entire Deimos event. Like the other D-Class before her, she was equipped with a camera and an earpiece. As the event began, she reported feeling extremely cold. Dr. Gradian suggested that she remain as calm as possible. She refused, insisting that she needed to leave as soon as possible. When she turned to leave, however, the apparition was standing at the other side of the aisle. Again, she repeated, "I need to get out of here right now. I need to get out of here right now." In response, the apparition nodded in agreement. Dr. Gradian reminded the D-Class that SCP-3182 would not permit her to leave, and she replied, I need to get out of here right now, or I'll wind up like her. When pressed for further explanation, the terrified D-Class insisted that she didn't understand what she was saying. It was as if the words were being shoved into her mouth, into her mind. She turned to move toward the entrance, and a soft gurgling was suddenly heard. Dr. Gradian warned her to stop moving immediately, and she froze in her tracks. Once she had calmed enough to respond to further instructions, she was ordered to turn and look at the apparition, or rather, as Dr. Gradian referred to it, the ghost. When she met the ghost's eyes, it was shaking its head fervently, eyes wide with fear. The floor beneath it shifted like liquid, the gurgling sound growing louder and louder until human arms burst through the floor, grabbing the ghost and dragging it down out of sight. The ghost gestured frantically toward the exit doors, screaming until it disappeared beneath the floor. The gurgling stopped, the floor was still, and all was quiet for a moment. Then, D693221 was in full panic mode once more, repeating over and over again, "I need to get out of here right now." She repeated this constantly for the remainder of her video footage, running through SCP-3182 frantically, screaming and searching desperately for an exit. Dr. Gradian attempted to direct her, to calm her in some way, but it was as if she could not hear a word he said. She was lost in the dread, lost in the dark. After the Deimos event was through, D693221 was found healthy and unharmed, at least physically. There were no more scheduled tests after this, and she was administered amnestic treatment and returned to the prison population with a reduced sentence. While the woman formerly known as D693221 carried on with her life, the research team reviewed the footage from her test. One researcher analyzed a distinct tattoo visible in one of the spectral arms that reached up from the floor, matching it to that of a man called Colin Mathers. Mathers is the former manager of SCP-3182 and has no reason to be manifesting as a ghostly arm in his abandoned former workplace, given that he is both alive and, as far as anyone can tell, completely ordinary. That is to say, very much not a ghost. Further investigation into the apparition of the girl was conducted, including a series of interviews with past regulars and employees of SCP-3182. Many of those interviewed recounted anomalous activity far before the closing of the store, including an unseen entity that would mimic their voices. This particular detail inspired the research team to conduct one more test. D442099 was sent into SCP-3182, placed in Aisle 3, and instructed to remain there and attempt communication with the entities there via a Foundation-developed EVP detector. It should be noted that the civilian versions of this technology are far less effective. First, D442099 began with a simple, "Hello?" The response recorded by the EVP detector was a mixture of male and female voices, at least 3, saying, "What can I get for you today?" Next, he asked, "Can you understand what I am saying to you?" And the entities responded, "That'll be unintelligible." He followed with, "Can you tell me what you look like?" This seemed to provoke a more emotional response, and the EVP detector picked up around 7 mixed human voices saying, "Look at me. This place has ruined me. I should have moved to Jefferson when I had the chance." "Where are you now?" resulted in over 25 voices saying, "One day I'll have enough money. I'll get out of this place." The response to, "What is your name?" was too garbled to understand, as over 70 voices responded at once. "Please, I don't understand," was met with soft gurgling, which then suddenly cut off. "I don't want to die here," seemed to attract the attention of the lone female ghost, as one solitary female voice replied, "You need to get out of here, right now." "Can I help you?" the D-Class asked. The same female voice replied, sounding strained and frightened, "Please get out of here, right—" Her voice cut off. "Hello," the D-Class called out. There was no response. "Hello," he asked again. The only response was that same soft gurgling. Then he said one more thing. "I don't want to die in this goddamn town." The recorded response was uproarious, cacophonous laughter belonging to a chorus of over 10,000 voices. The sound was nearly deafening. There are undercover Foundation personnel stationed outside of SCP-3182, instructed to prevent any civilians from entering the premises. Civilians who ask follow-up questions are to be given the cover story involving unstable construction.
Any past witnesses to a Deimos event must be located and given amnestics dosed in relation to their level of exposure. Because the town of Denton is relatively isolated, any affected individuals should be easy to track down. No Foundation personnel are permitted to enter SCP-3182 during a Deimos event. Any testing conducted during a Deimos event must be approved by at least one Level 3 personnel. However, if any personnel report hearing a soft, gurgling sound while inside the building, they are ordered to vacate immediately. SCP-3182 is a tragic mystery, an abandoned, decaying piece of a town steeped in misery. Like the town itself, it is filled with fear and uncertainty, with a pervasive sense of hopelessness, of no way out during the darkest moments. I have heard from time to time the expression, dead-end job, and I understand it to apply fairly well in this case. Those working at SCP-3182 while it was open seemed to fill the place with so much misery, so much dread and resentment, that something anomalous began to take root. Something, for 1 hour a day, makes those fears real. The people in SCP-3182 believed it to be a dead end, a place where hopes and dreams go to die. And now, it is. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-2740, It Wasn't There.